Hi, my name's Raya, and I guess this is the part where I tell you how I ended up sitting alone in an ER with a broken arm, a concussion, and a phone screen that lit up with the words, "Grab a taxi." That was my parents' response. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "We're on our way." Just that. And while they sipped rosé with my sister's fiancé at a waterfront lunch, I didn't even know was an engagement party. I was bleeding, both inside and out. They say family protects you. But what if mine always planned to leave me behind? How do you fight a family who rewrites the truth before you even know what happened? The first thing I remember is the beeping, soft and steady, mechanical, nothing like the chaos that came before it. The white fluorescent lights above me felt like they were burning through my eyelids. My mouth was dry, my head pounded, and my left arm ached like it had been crushed in a vice. A nurse noticed me stirring. "You're awake. That's good news." "You've been out for a few hours." I tried to speak, but it came out as a hoarse rasp. She offered me a sip of water, holding the straw to my lips. I managed a weak nod and whispered, "What happened?" "You were in a car accident," she said gently. "A driver ran a red light. You took the brunt of the impact on the driver's side. You've got a clean break in your left arm and a concussion. No internal bleeding, thank God." The words settled like a fog over me. I closed my eyes again, trying to piece it all together. The rain, the stoplight turning green, the blur of headlights. Then, nothing. Just this sterile hospital room, the smell of antiseptic, and the dull weight of painkillers in my veins. "Did someone call my parents?" I asked, still groggy. "We tried, no answer. You can try texting them if you'd like. Sometimes hearing it from you helps." My phone had survived the crash better than I did, cracked but functional. I clumsily typed out a message with my right hand. "I was in an accident. At St. Mary's, broken arm, concussion. Can you pick me up?" It took more energy than I expected. My hands trembled as I hit send. I waited. Minutes passed. Then 3 dots appeared. The reply came fast, and it hit harder than the crash. "OMG, that's awful. But we're at an important lunch with Julian. Grab a taxi?" I stared at the screen. Not a "we'll be right there." Not even a "call us when you're discharged." Just a casual shrug of a message from the 2 people who brought me into this world. I read it again. Then a 3rd time. Grab a taxi. That was their response to their youngest daughter lying in a hospital bed with a concussion and a broken arm. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. The fog in my head began to lift, replaced with a sharp, cold clarity I hadn't felt in years. They were having lunch. With Julian. Julian, the golden boy. The man who wasn't even part of our family until Seraphine decided he was. My parents had adored him from day one. Successful, charming, polished. He had a way of making them laugh even when he said nothing of value. I was never the favorite, not even close. Seraphine was the pride of the family. Firstborn, first to get a master's degree, first to make 6 figures. She walked into every room like she owned it. And I was always just there, the quiet one, the too sensitive one, the one who paid half the down payment on the condo but signed over the paperwork just to keep things simple. Maybe they thought I wouldn't notice, or maybe they hoped I wouldn't say anything when I did. "Is there anyone else we can call for you?" the nurse asked. I didn't answer immediately. My eyes remained on the text. That one sentence, "grab a taxi," echoed louder than anything I had heard since waking up. "Yes," I finally said. "I know who to call." His name was Officer Dave Reynolds. He'd known our family for years. A friend of my uncle's from the police department, a good man, quiet, reliable, not one for dramatics, but he knew how to get a point across. I dialed his number. He answered on the 2nd ring. "Raya?" His voice carried concern. "Heard about the accident. Are you okay?" "I will be," I said. "Listen, they still haven't responded, but I know where they are." "Your parents?" "Yes, they're at the Gilded Fork, downtown, with Julian." There was a brief pause on the line. I imagined Dave setting his coffee down, glancing toward his partner. "You want us to do a wellness notification?" he asked carefully. I want them to be notified, I replied. In person, uniformed, just so they understand the seriousness. That's all. Another pause, then a calm, firm response. Understood. I hung up. The nurse returned to check my vitals. I answered her questions mechanically, trying not to let the buzzing in my head overwhelm me. But inside, something had shifted. All my life, I'd waited for them to see me, to treat me like I mattered, like I wasn't just background noise to their curated family image. They didn't come when I needed them, because rosé and risotto were more important, because Julian was more important. And maybe that had always been true. But this time, I wasn't going to swallow it. Not quietly, not again. Let's see how important that rosé really is when cops start asking questions. It didn't take long. Dave texted me 20 minutes later. Just a brief update. Notification made. Your parents were at the Gilded Fork. Seemed surprised. That was it. Clinical and to the point. I didn't need the details. My mind had already painted the entire scene like a vivid mural of discomfort. In my head, I could see it playing out, the moment two uniformed officers walked into that trendy glass-walled restaurant, the one where you needed a reservation 3 weeks in advance, and the wine list was longer than the menu. I could see my mother's hand freeze mid-air, a delicate flute of rosé caught just before reaching her lips. My father, ever the man of order, probably tightened his jaw, maybe adjusted his cufflinks like he always did when he was caught off guard. And Seraphine, she would have leaned back in her seat, maintaining posture, waiting to see if whatever was happening might inconvenience her moment. Julian probably tried to smooth things over, flashing that well-practiced smile of his. But I wasn't there to see it, because I hadn't been invited. I had almost drifted off again when my phone buzzed on the hospital tray. It was a message from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in months. We were never close, but she was the kind that sent Happy Thanksgiving texts every year without fail. Her message read, "Didn't know you weren't coming to the engagement lunch. Seraphine looked stunning. Hope you're okay." I stared at it for a while, blinking like the words weren't in English. Engagement lunch? That wasn't just a lunch. That was a formal family gathering. That was an event people took off work for, drove across town for, brought gifts to, wore heels for. And I wasn't just not there, I hadn't even been told it was happening. I wasn't absent, I was erased. Somehow that realization hit harder than the accident itself. It wasn't the first time I'd felt left out, but this wasn't oversight. This was orchestration. The room felt smaller, tighter. I moved my legs slowly to the side of the bed, careful of my sling. I picked up my phone again, scrolling through messages, but found nothing. Not a single text, not a word about today's event, or Seraphine, or even a thinking of you. Instead, something else popped up. A notification from another cousin, a screenshot mistakenly sent to our group thread. It was a photo of a chat labeled engagement planning, filled with names of family members and lines of conversation. But not mine, I wasn't in it. Underneath one thread, someone had written, "Let's just not tell Raya, she's always so dramatic. We don't need that vibe today." Another chimed in, "Exactly. It's a happy day. Let's not complicate it." My name wasn't mentioned again. I didn't cry. Not because I didn't want to, but because there was no more room left in me for tears. There was just this hollow thump in my chest and the slow, seeping understanding that this wasn't new. It had always been this way. Birthdays I found out about from Instagram posts. Group vacations I hadn't been invited to. Family dinners where I must have been busy. I used to tell myself they just forgot. That maybe I didn't answer a text, or someone thought I was out of town. But now I saw the pattern. It was intentional. When we were teenagers, Seraphine got the big birthday bashes, the custom cakes, the backyard tents with twinkle lights. I got dinner at Applebee's, if it fit everyone's schedule. When she landed her first job, Mom made a scrapbook. When I got my MBA while working 2 jobs, they mailed a card that arrived 3 days late. I had been told, repeatedly, that I was too sensitive, too serious, too confrontational. They called it tough love. I called it erasure, but only in my head. Until now, lying there, one arm useless, Head pounding, I realized the truth. I hadn't been forgotten. I had been carefully, deliberately removed. The nurse came in again, this time to check vitals. I nodded when she asked if I was okay, even though I wasn't. She asked if I needed anything else. Silence, I said. And maybe a blanket. She smiled gently. Coming right up. Once alone again, I opened my texts and reread the family group chat screenshot, every line sliced like paper cuts. She always makes things about her. Can we not make this day about trauma? She'll find a way to turn a toast into a therapy session. That last one stuck with me, because I had done that, once, years ago. At another family event, I'd made a small comment about being grateful for the little things, for getting through tough times. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even directed at anyone. But clearly, that was too much. I turned off my phone. No more notifications, no more messages, no more accidental peeks into a life I was never invited to share. My hand moved slowly to my stomach. I hadn't eaten since the accident. My appetite was gone. The physical pain didn't compare to the ache of knowing that even if I had died in that crash, I'm not sure anyone at that lunch would have noticed until the check came. For years, I told myself I was just different, that my family operated a certain way and I needed to meet them where they were, that love looked different for everyone. But love isn't silent when you're in pain. Love doesn't show up only when it's convenient. Love doesn't exclude you from the moments you'll remember forever, even if it's just to say, "We wish you could be here." They didn't wish me there. They wished I wouldn't exist long enough to ruin the pictures. I curled up on the side of the bed that didn't hurt, pulling the blanket up to my chin. Outside, the sky had turned a soft gray blue, the kind that signaled dusk settling in. Maybe tomorrow I'd start figuring out what came next. But for tonight, I needed nothing from anyone. Turns out, even my absence made them look better. It had been a few hours since I'd turned off my phone. The hospital had grown quieter as the afternoon slipped into early evening. I could hear a faint hum from the hallway, nurses exchanging notes, someone pushing a cart. Nothing urgent, nothing loud, just the rhythm of people doing their jobs, something steady, unlike the static swirling in my chest. I must have dozed off at some point because when I opened my eyes again, there was someone new standing near my bed. Dr. Mason. A name I hadn't heard in years, but a face I knew instantly. He was my mother's friend from the garden club, the kind of man who always called me kiddo and brought cinnamon muffins to neighborhood brunches. "I didn't realize you'd be the one handling my case," I said, voice still gravelly. He smiled softly, stepping closer. "I wasn't, actually. Just passing through. Heard what happened. Figured I'd stop in and check." His tone was gentle, but not forced. Familiar, but layered now with something else, hesitation. "Thanks," I said. "They said the other driver ran a red light." He nodded. "Yeah, sounds like a mess. But you're lucky. A few more inches and that impact would have been on your chest." I didn't know what to say to that, so I stayed quiet. Then he said it, so casually, as if commenting on the weather. "Your parents didn't come?" I didn't flinch. "Nope." "I was surprised," he said, leaning slightly on the bed rail. "I mean, it looked serious, not like a fender bender. Usually someone shows up for these things." He didn't say more. He didn't have to. The word sat heavy in the air between us. He left a few minutes later after reminding me to rest and drink more fluids. But the damage had already been done, and not by the accident. Someone else had noticed. Someone who wasn't family. Someone who wasn't trying to hurt me. And that made it real. Not imagined. Not exaggerated. Not too emotional. I laid back slowly, staring at the ceiling, remembering that phrase like a recording on loop. "You're too emotional." I'd heard it so many times over the years that it had become my family's version of a shut-off switch. At 13, when I found out Seraphine had been accepted to a summer science program, and I hadn't even been told it existed, I cried. Not because I was jealous, but because I wanted to matter too. My mother had looked at me and said, "This is her moment, Raya. Don't make it about you." At 16, when my college acceptance letter arrived and no one was home to celebrate with me, I baked my own cake. When I showed it to them later that evening, proud and hopeful, my dad had chuckled. Well, that's sweet, but no need to be dramatic. At 24, I called my mom from my first solo apartment, sobbing because I was scared and overwhelmed and everything felt too big. She'd said, "You need to toughen up. Real life doesn't pause for feelings." And then there was the big one, 30. The year I put a down payment on the condo. I asked Seraphine to co-sign because I thought it might help the approval process. Somehow, the paperwork ended up in her name. When I asked Mom why it had been done behind my back, she said, "It's not that serious. Don't blow it out of proportion." Those words had been my life's refrain, a quiet erasure of every experience that didn't fit their script. Now, lying in a hospital bed with a bruised body and a bruised heart, I finally saw it for what it was. Not accidental, not incidental, deliberate. My family hadn't just neglected me, they'd edited me out, and I had let them. Because every time I'd tried to speak up, to say, "This hurts," I was met with that same phrase, "You're being too sensitive." It was a weapon disguised as a comfort, a dismissal painted as wisdom. But now I wasn't a teenager crying in the bathroom. I wasn't a new graduate afraid of making rent. I was a grown woman with a busted arm, a bank account, and a phone full of receipts, and I was tired of pretending it didn't happen. I pushed the hospital tray aside and reached for my notepad, one of those spiral-bound ones they leave on the windowsill for recovery notes. I didn't care what it was meant for. I needed it. On the first page, I wrote in bold, what they did versus what they said. Underneath, I started listing. Text. Grab a taxi. After a confirmed concussion and fractured humerus. Screenshot from group chat. I was actively excluded. Down payment receipts. Condo purchase dated 2 years ago, paid from my account. Title registry, under Seraphine's name. No joint ownership listed. Then I flipped to a fresh page. Times I was called too emotional, but was actually right. The list was long. I only made it halfway through before I needed to stop. Not because it hurt, but because the clarity was finally setting in. I'd spent my whole life trying not to be a burden, not to make waves, not to draw attention to my needs, but it hadn't earned me love, or inclusion, or loyalty. It had just made me easier to ignore. Now, for the first time, I was collecting, organizing, not for revenge, not even for justice, yet, just to remember, to reclaim the truth before it got rewritten by people who preferred a version of me that didn't exist. The version who never asked for anything, who clapped at the right times, who quietly watched as others got credit for her work, her contributions, her sacrifices. I put the pen down, closed the notepad, and looked out the window. The sky had turned navy, speckled with early stars. Somewhere across town, Seraphine was probably opening engagement gifts, basking in applause, sipping champagne she didn't pay for. And maybe Mom was making her signature toast. The one that always ended with, "We've always been a strong family." I imagined her voice. Then I imagined mine. If I couldn't matter to them emotionally, I whispered, maybe I could matter legally. After writing that sentence in my notebook, if I couldn't matter to them emotionally, maybe I could matter legally. I stared at it for a while. The words didn't feel bitter. They felt sharp, clear, like the edge of something I'd carried around for years without realizing it could cut both ways. The next morning, the nurse came in at 7 for vitals. My body still ached, my arm was still wrapped tight in a sling, but my mind was the clearest it had been since the accident. She asked if I wanted breakfast. I said no, I wasn't hungry. What I needed was answers and paperwork. By 9 o'clock, I was discharged. They arranged a ride share for me since, of course, no one had shown up. I gave the driver my condo address, already bracing for the tension I knew would be waiting when I walked in. It was quiet when I arrived. Too quiet. Like the silence that lingers after an argument, even when no words were spoken. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. My keys still worked, though something told me it was only a matter of time before that changed. The living room looked untouched, staged almost, magazines stacked neatly, a scented candle burning too long on the table, as if someone had tried to make the space look welcoming in a hurry. I didn't call out. I wasn't there to announce myself. I was there to investigate. I went to the file cabinet in the spare bedroom where I'd stored everything from mortgage papers to tax documents. My left arm slowed me down, but I was determined. I pulled out a thick folder labeled Condo, 2022 Purchase. I flipped through the pages. The original mortgage estimate, proof of earnest money, inspection records. And then, there it was. A single-page document that had once been passed to me in a rush during closing with the words, "It's just a temporary transfer. You'll still be the one paying. It's just easier for approval this way." Signed by me and by Seraphine. It was a full ownership transfer. No expiration clause, no reversion language, no joint title. It was hers, and I had signed it. I sat there, in my own condo, reading the fine print of how I'd legally given away the only piece of security I'd built for myself, because I'd trusted them, because I was the easy one, the one who didn't need the spotlight. My chest burned, not with shame, but with certainty. I was going to take it back. An hour later, I heard the front door open and close. Heels clicked across the floor like they were walking a runway. Seraphine's voice followed. "Raya, you're home." I didn't answer right away. I tucked the paperwork back in the folder and stood. She appeared in the doorway holding a bouquet of tulips, my favorite, ironically, and a gift bag. "I brought you something," she said, walking in like it was her apartment. "And I just wanted to say, I'm sorry you've been so upset." So upset? I reached for the flowers without taking them. "Thanks." She placed the gift bag on the desk. "There's a little something in there. Just, from me and Julian. We thought it might cheer you up. It's been a lot lately." It had. "I'll open it later," I said, voice steady. "Of course." She smiled, then added, "I hope you're feeling better." "I'm getting there." "Good. Well, I'll let you rest. Just wanted to drop that off and say hi." She didn't ask about the accident. She didn't ask about the pain. And I didn't give her the satisfaction of asking why she really came. When she left, I sat down and opened the gift bag. Inside was a small ceramic dish with gold trim, the kind of thing you'd put jewelry or keys in. Tucked beneath it, a folded document. I pulled it out, expecting a card. It was a copy of the title transfer. Again. This time, with the phrase "finalized" written in blue ink across the top. My name wasn't on it. It wasn't even in the footnotes. I stared at it, lips pressed together, not blinking. They weren't even hiding it anymore. I walked to the kitchen, scanned the document with my phone, and emailed it to myself. Then I opened my laptop, created a new folder called Condo Ownership Dispute, and began uploading everything I had. Photos of the receipts, screenshots of the group chat, copies of all communication where I'd paid for utilities, maintenance, the HOA fees, every last thread of evidence. And then I sent a short direct email to my cousin Melissa, an attorney. Subject line, legal question. Body, what would it take to reclaim a property I purchased but mistakenly signed over to someone else? I have documentation of my payments and their statements confirming it was temporary. She replied within 20 minutes. Depends on jurisdiction, but you may have grounds to pursue a quiet title action. Can you send me all documents? I sent everything. After that, I went to take a shower, my first one in days that wasn't supervised by a nurse. The water was too hot. It stung my back. My arm ached when I tried to reach for the shampoo, but it was worth it. When I got out, I wrapped myself in a towel and looked at myself in the mirror. I didn't look broken. I looked ready. By evening, I had a reply from Melissa. She confirmed what I already suspected. If I could prove I paid for the property and was misled into signing the document, I had a case. A good one. That night, I pulled on jeans and a sweater, stepped into sneakers, and brushed my hair for the first time in 4 days. I applied just enough concealer to cover the bruise on my forehead. Let them think I was still recovering. Let them think I was still the quiet one. Let them think wrong. I checked my reflection once more before grabbing my purse. Then I texted Melissa. Let's file it. Some inherit power. I built mine, and now I'm enforcing it. By the next morning, the silence in the condo felt different, not just empty, strategic. I'd spent the night reviewing every document I'd scanned, filing them into neatly labeled folders, building my digital arsenal. When the sun finally slipped through the blinds and hit the floor, I already had a plan. I sat at the dining table, the one Seraphine and I had picked out from that overpriced showroom, and opened my laptop. The email subject line wrote itself. Subject: regarding the engagement. I kept the tone calm, distant, almost surgical. No dramatics, no venom, just facts, evidence, and a refusal to let them write my story without me. I attached screenshots from the group chat that excluded me. Proof I was never even considered. The mortgage statements with my name, the wire transfers, and finally, a scanned copy of the transfer agreement I had unknowingly signed. Then, one final line: I will not attend. Consider this the last time I respond without legal counsel. I hovered over send for a full minute, then clicked it. It was done. Less than an hour later, the ripple began. Seraphine's text was first. Raya, come on. Don't escalate this. We're family. I stared at the message. For a moment, I wondered if she truly believed that, or if family was just the tool she used when she needed forgiveness on demand. I didn't reply. I blocked her instead. Next came a voicemail from Verena. Her voice was syrupy, like she was laying it on thick for a church bake sale. You're being really dramatic, honey. This isn't the way to handle things. If you need to talk, we can talk. But airing grievances like this, it's not classy. Classy. As if what they'd done was a fashion faux pas I had overreacted to. I deleted the voicemail and turned off my ringer. Around noon, I was in the middle of typing up a timeline for my lawyer when I heard the doorbell. I wasn't expecting anyone. I hesitated, then walked slowly to the door, peeking through the peephole. It was our neighbor, Mrs. Delaney. I opened the door. Hi, sweetheart, she said, holding a small container. Brought you some chicken soup. Heard you were in an accident. She smiled warmly, her silver hair perfectly curled. I stepped aside, letting her in. Thanks, I said. That's really kind of you. She walked into the kitchen like she had 100 times before, placing the container on the counter. I saw your mom the other day, she said casually, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She was hosting that engagement brunch for Seraphine. Lovely event, though I was surprised you weren't there. I stiffened but nodded. Yeah, I wasn't invited. She blinked, startled. Really? That's odd. Your mom said you were traveling, that it would have been too upsetting to change the energy of the day. Too upsetting. There it was again. My emotions, always the perceived threat. I guess they didn't want to complicate things, I said flatly. She frowned. Well, that doesn't seem right, especially considering... She trailed off as if realizing she might have said too much. I smiled politely. Don't worry about it. She touched my shoulder gently. Families can be complicated, but that doesn't mean they can erase you. After she left, I sat on the couch holding the edge of the soup container and let her words sink in. They can't erase you. But they had tried, and they were still trying. By mid-afternoon, I'd compiled everything into one long email thread and sent it to Melissa, my cousin and legal advisor. She replied in 20 minutes. Raya, you have a strong case. Quiet title action is appropriate here. You'll need to prepare for discovery, but I think we can win this. I responded with 2 words. Do it. Later that evening, I drafted one more message, directed, not public. One final attempt at resolution, just in case Seraphine had even a sliver of decency left. Seraphine, I gave you the benefit of the doubt when I signed that document. I believed you when you said it was temporary. I believed you because I was raised to believe that family protects one another. But family doesn't lie. Family doesn't gaslight. Family doesn't steal and then call it love. Reverse the title transfer. Return what's mine, or I'll let the courts decide. Raya, I didn't send it with hope. I sent it as a courtesy. Her response never came, but I wasn't surprised. Silence had always been her answer when she wasn't in control of the narrative. I powered down my laptop, stood up, and stretched. Outside, the sun had dipped behind the trees, casting a golden edge across the sky. I made myself a cup of tea, walked to the window, and watched the light change. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about reclaiming the spotlight or demanding apologies. This was about the truth. They ignored my warning. Now I was done talking. The email had been sent. The legal paperwork was filed. My lawyer had confirmed receipt and told me we were officially in motion, and I felt calm, not victorious, not vengeful, just still. Until 3 days later, when a cream-colored envelope arrived taped to my front door. I found it early that morning after stepping out to grab the mail. It fluttered slightly in the breeze, the tape curling at the edges. My name was printed in bold across the front. No salutation, no warmth. Inside, a formal eviction notice, effective immediately, signed by Seraphine. The printed language was precise and cold. Unauthorized occupant, non-tenant, trespassing risk. The legal jargon felt like it belonged in a movie, but the signature at the bottom was real. Seraphine's neat cursive, just as rehearsed as her public smiles. She hadn't even knocked. I stepped back inside, locking the door behind me with a calm that bordered on eerie. I didn't scream. I didn't call. I didn't panic. I sat down at the kitchen table, placed the letter beside my coffee, and read it again. Then I folded it in half, tucked it under my laptop, and opened a new document titled Retaliation Strategy. Later that afternoon, I started packing. It took me longer than expected with only one usable arm, but I refused to ask for help. The sling itched beneath my sweater. My ribs still ached when I twisted. But I packed anyway, because I knew Seraphine would expect me to fall apart. She expected me to beg. Instead, I folded my clothes neatly, stacked them into a single suitcase, and loaded my toiletries into a tote bag. I packed not because I believed I didn't belong there, but because I needed them to know I wasn't afraid to walk away, even from something I had built with my own hands. When I zipped up the suitcase, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Then the door opened. Seraphine didn't even knock. She walked in like she owned the place, which, on paper, for now, she did. She stood just inside the doorway, arms crossed, face carefully blank. Not smug, not cruel, just distant, like she'd made peace with hurting me as long as it kept things tidy. "Moving out?" she asked, voice light, casual. I didn't answer. I bent to zip my second bag. "You could have just let it go," she said, stepping further into the living room. "But no, you had to make this into a thing." A thing. My home, my investment, my betrayal. I turned to face her. "You lied to me? About everything," she shrugged. "You were never good at letting things roll off your back. That's always been your problem." I stared at her for a long second, then said simply, "And yours is assuming I'll never fight back." I pushed past her, suitcase in one hand, bag over my shoulder. She didn't move, didn't offer to help, didn't apologize. Verena was waiting in the hallway. She looked me over, lips tight, eyes blank. "You're blowing this out of proportion," she muttered. The phrase landed like a slap I didn't bother dodging. I didn't respond. I didn't owe her any more words. I walked past both of them, my gait uneven from the pain, but my spine straight. Each step down the hall felt like pulling roots out of the ground, slow, painful, but necessary. When I reached the elevator, I hit the button and waited in silence. No one followed. No one tried to stop me. No one cared. And that, I realized, was the most freeing part of it all. An hour later, I sat in a quiet guest room 2 miles away, at a friend's house. The walls were bare, the furniture simple, but it was safe. It was mine, for now. I didn't unpack. Instead, I opened my laptop, pulled up the legal case file, and began organizing every receipt, document, photo, and message I had into folders. Payments, deed, family communications, eviction. I wasn't building a defense. I was building a case. The next morning, I woke to a ping on my phone, an alert from social media. Seraphine had posted a photo of the condo, a smiling selfie of her and Julian on the balcony, champagne flutes raised. Caption, "New beginnings in our beautiful home. So grateful for this next chapter." My fingers hovered over the screen. I didn't comment. I didn't like it. I didn't send it to anyone. I took a screenshot. Then I emailed it to Melissa. Subject: Exhibit A, Public Misrepresentation. I didn't need to respond with rage. I had paper trails. I had timestamps. I had her signature on 2 separate documents. Let the court see gratitude measured in hashtags. A few days later, I met with Melissa in person. We sat in her office, surrounded by case folders and caffeine. "You ready for this?" she asked, glancing over her notes. I nodded. She leaned forward. "We're going full court order, civil suit, public hearing. This won't stay quiet." "Good," I said. "Quiet is how they win." My voice didn't shake. My hands didn't tremble. My posture didn't cave. They had thrown me out of my house. Let's see how they handle getting thrown out of theirs. The filing had gone public that morning. Melissa had called to confirm the civil suit was officially listed in the court's database, and a hearing date had been set. No more warnings, no more private emails. The truth now had a docket number. I was on my second cup of coffee in my friend Carla's kitchen when I got the notification, a message request from Julian. That alone stopped me cold. I hadn't spoken to him directly in over a year. The last real interaction was at a family barbecue where he complimented the patio furniture and avoided my eyes when Seraphine made a passive-aggressive joke about some people holding grudges too long. Now, out of the blue, a message. It wasn't long. "I didn't know they excluded you. I thought you chose not to come. That's what your mom and Seraphine told me." I read it twice before clicking reply. Not to fight, not to vent, but because his version of the truth needed updating. I typed slowly, deliberately. "That's not what happened. I wasn't invited. They hid it, repeatedly. I have proof. Group chats, payment records, title transfers. You've been lied to, just like I was used." A moment passed, then another. His reply came. "I'm sorry, I didn't know. I'm pulling back from Seraphine. A lot doesn't feel right anymore." I didn't say, "I told you so." I didn't thank him either. Instead, I said what mattered. You don't need to choose sides. Just don't let silence rewrite the truth. He left the message on read. That was enough. That evening, Melissa and I sat side by side at her office conference table, reviewing the last round of filings. The civil suit now included counts of wrongful eviction, fraud, and property misrepresentation, all backed by documents, all time-stamped, all legal. She looked up at me mid-scroll. "You know this could get ugly. I'm counting on it," I said. The following morning, Seraphine responded, not through direct contact, but on social media. A carefully crafted caption beneath a black and white photo of her, staring pensively out the window of a high-rise cafe. "Sometimes family is just the people who cheer for you, not tear you down. Learning to release toxic ties has been the most liberating part of this journey. Shash, self-love. Shash, healthy boundaries. Shash, protect your peace." Within minutes, people began commenting. "You're so strong, Seraphine. Cutting out the negativity. Yes, girl. Family drama? You don't owe anyone your energy." I didn't reply, but Melissa did. Using her firm's official account, she posted a redacted version of the court filing. No commentary, no hashtags, just a statement. "Filed and served. Full civil petition available via court record search. Defense counsel may contact our office with questions." It didn't take long before the tone of Seraphine's comments shifted. "What's this about a lawsuit? Wait, are you being sued over a house? I thought you bought that condo." I watched in real time as Seraphine's curated image began to crack. And I didn't lift a finger. But I wasn't done. That Saturday was her bridal shower, a lavish event at a rooftop venue. I didn't attend, of course. I had no interest in performing grief in front of pastel tablecloths and custom cupcakes, but my lawyer did. At exactly 2:00 p.m., Melissa's associate walked into the venue with a manila envelope and a court seal. Seraphine was mid-sentence, holding a glass of rosé, when she was approached. "Miss Seraphine Caldwell?" the woman asked. "Yes?" "You've been officially served." A quiet fell over the crowd like someone had cut the music mid-song. A few guests gasped. Someone whispered my name. Someone else muttered, "Is this a joke?" It wasn't. The envelope was handed off. Seraphine stood frozen. For once, no words, no pose, no performance, and I wasn't even there. I was at home, my temporary home, watching the sky shift colors through the window, a cup of tea in hand, and a peaceful kind of fire in my chest. That night, a new post from Seraphine popped up. Just a quote this time. "Sometimes silence speaks louder than screaming." A photo of her looking away from the camera, windswept hair, no caption. But this time the comments were less supportive. "Wait, are you suing your sister? Did you really evict her from her own house? I thought you said she ghosted the family." And then, from someone I didn't know. Funny how the toxic one is always the one with receipts. I didn't smile, not exactly, but I did feel something settle inside me. For years, they'd written the story of who I was. Now every word they tried to erase was inked in court record. They built their empire on my silence. Now it was crumbling, brick by brick. The last text I read before closing my eyes that night was from Melissa. "Tomorrow, 2:00 p.m. It will be delivered on site, just as planned." I slept surprisingly well. No dreams, no tossing, just rest. The kind I hadn't had in weeks. I woke up early, made myself toast, and sat by the window in Carla's guest room. The sky was overcast, gray and soft, like the quiet before something inevitable. I took a breath, held it, and let it go slowly. This wasn't about rage anymore. This was about completion. By noon, Melissa had confirmed that the package was on its way to the event venue. The engagement party, what was supposed to be Seraphine's crowning moment, was being held at a waterfront ballroom they'd rented for the day. I knew the place. It was all exposed beams, glass, and river views, perfect for Instagram stories and completely indifferent to the truth. Inside the package was everything I wanted them to see, and more importantly, what I wanted others to witness. A printed screenshot of Verena's infamous "grab a taxi" message, framed in matte black. An envelope containing bank records showing every cent I'd put into the condo over the last 2 years. And a single note card that read, "I decline the invitation to a place I already paid for." No dramatic paragraphs, no threats, just a statement of fact. I imagined the moment that box would be opened, the silence it would bring, the awkward shuffling of feet. I didn't need to be there to feel it. At exactly 2:06 p.m., Melissa texted me one word: delivered. I put down my phone and made tea. The following morning, news started circulating. A friend who had been invited but didn't attend forwarded me a few messages. One read, "Did you see what Raya sent? I thought she was the one who ghosted the family." Another, "Seraphine looked like she saw a ghost. Julian walked out right after they opened the box. Didn't say a word." That one made me pause. Julian walked out. No speech, no dramatic goodbye, just silence. Sometimes silence is the loudest thing in a room full of liars. A few days later, the final blow arrived not in a manila envelope, but with the sound of metal being drilled into brick. I sat in Carla's car across the street from the condo as 2 county clerks nailed a court order to the front of the building. Eviction notice. Sealed and signed. Seraphine stood in the doorway, arms crossed, face pale. Verena hovered behind her, trying to reason with the clerk, pleading about wedding stress and family misunderstandings. The man didn't flinch. Malcolm stood off to the side, hands in his pockets, not saying a word, not lifting a finger. He had always been a master at avoiding discomfort. Silence had always been his safe space. As the clerk stepped away from the doorway, Seraphine ripped the paper off the brick and stormed inside. I didn't need to see more. I told Carla we could leave. That evening, Melissa called me from the courthouse. She was smiling. I could hear it in her voice. "It's done," she said. "Full ownership returned to you. The judge added a public note about the wrongful eviction and acknowledged the documents you provided. In his words, it never should have happened." I didn't cry. I didn't cheer. I just sat still, letting the moment pass through me like wind. Melissa added, I'll send the signed decision via email, but you're cleared to return anytime you want. Thank you, I said. She paused. You want to grab dinner tonight? Maybe later, I replied. I think I need a little space first. 3 days later, I unlocked the front door of my condo with a new key. The lock had been changed by order of the court. The space smelled faintly of lavender and lemon polish, probably from the cleaners Melissa hired, but it felt sterile, empty in the most honest way. I stepped inside and stood there for a long moment. No pictures on the walls, no family photos, no decor choices I didn't agree to, just walls, light, and silence. I placed my bag on the kitchen counter and turned on the kettle. I didn't plan a toast. I didn't throw a welcome back party for myself. I just made tea, opened the windows, and sat quietly with a notepad. Not to make another list. Not this time. I wrote a single sentence. Some people inherit power. Others build it. The ones who build it know how to keep it. Later that night, I sat on the balcony alone. The city lights flickered across the skyline. From where I sat, I could see the space where Seraphine once posed for her photos, her filtered version of our life. It was quiet now, and it was mine. I didn't take everything back. I just took back what should have never been stolen. That sentence stayed with me for days. I didn't take everything back. I just took back what should have never been stolen. It became a quiet mantra I repeated while doing dishes, folding laundry, or walking past my own reflection in the hallway mirror. There was no euphoria, no dramatic swell of closure, just a return to stillness. The condo no longer echoed with other people's choices. It was mine again. But it didn't feel like it used to. Not quite. There were shadows in the corners, echoes of every "you're overreacting" and "we didn't think you'd want to be involved." Those words had a way of staining the walls, lingering in door frames, hiding behind light switches. So I started small. I boxed up the photos first. The ones in silver frames, on the mantel, in the hallway. Family portraits with tight smiles and forced poses. Ones where I was standing off to the side, always a little farther from the center. I didn't throw them away. I wasn't interested in erasing history. I just didn't want to live inside a museum curated by people who pretended I didn't matter. I cleared the closets next, shelves lined with Seraphine's temporary boxes, Verena's cookware she'd conveniently forgotten to take with her, old Christmas decor labeled with masking tape that read, Raya's spare space. I donated most of it. The rest I packed in plain cardboard and left outside the storage unit with a note. Unclaimed property, 14 days. The bedroom was the hardest. I left it for last. The duvet had been a joint pick between me and Seraphine during the brief window when we were pretending to play house. The lamp was a gift from Verena, wrapped in a note that said, For your first real home, don't mess it up. I replaced both. I opened the windows. I bought fresh eucalyptus for the bathroom and finally threw away the shower curtain with the rust stain she always said added character. And when I stood in the middle of that space, bare feet on hardwood floors, sun pouring in from the west-facing balcony, I whispered, I don't want to erase them. I just don't want to live among their shadows. That weekend, I heard from an old coworker that Julian had moved out of the apartment he once shared with Seraphine. He'd gone quiet on social media. She'd deleted all their engagement photos. Verena, I learned through Carla, had moved in with her sister in Oregon. Just until things calmed down, she reportedly said. I imagined her sitting at someone else's kitchen table, spooning sugar into coffee and retelling the story in her version, where I was still difficult, where she was blindsided. But I didn't feel triumph. Not really. I felt relief. I was mid-morning into reorganizing my bookshelves when I received a letter. Actual paper. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. Harold. My grandfather. The envelope was thin. One sheet, folded once. Raya, it began. Some people mistake silence for weakness, but I always knew. Your silence was thinking, planning, surviving. I'm sorry I didn't speak up more. I saw things. You know I did. And I should have said more. But age makes you tired, and family politics makes you quieter than you want to be. But I want you to know. I saw you. I always did. I sat down with the letter on my lap, holding it with both hands like it might tear if I breathed too hard. It was the first time I'd cried in months. Not the gasping, messy kind, just a quiet stream that fell steadily as I read his words again. I saw you. Validation didn't change the past, but sometimes it stitches together the present just enough so it stops unraveling. 2 weeks later, I signed a lease to rent out the guest bedroom. A grad student in her late 20s moved in, someone respectful who kept to herself and paid on time. We shared kitchen space and made small talk about tea brands. It worked. I also started volunteering at the neighborhood legal aid center once a week. It wasn't about revenge. It was about making sure no one else signed something they didn't understand. No one else got told, "You're lucky to even be here." Because housing isn't just walls and windows, it's dignity. I helped a single mom fight a sudden rent hike. I worked with a young couple to understand lease terms in English instead of legal jargon. I even drafted a resource pamphlet on quiet title actions, anonymously, of course. Every step, every little effort helped me take back not just space, but voice. Last Sunday, I walked past a cafe I hadn't visited in a long time. It was where Seraphine used to host her PR brunches, women in branding meetings that were less about mentorship and more about curated photos and networking over overpriced eggs. I stepped inside, ordered a black coffee, no cream, no sugar, just clean and bitter. No one recognized me. And for the first time, I didn't mind. I wasn't invisible anymore. I just chose peace over proving myself. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just walks out and doesn't come back. Sometimes the loudest victories are won in silence, not with shouting matches or dramatic confrontations, but with steady steps, quiet strength, and undeniable truth. Raya didn't set out for revenge. She sought clarity, dignity, and peace in a world that constantly tried to shrink her. What about you? Have you ever been made to feel invisible by the very people who should have stood by you? Share your story in the comments. We read every one. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories just like this one. Hello, I'm Lily. 3 weeks ago, I woke up in a hospital bed, groggy, confused, only to find out my parents had filed to declare me mentally unfit. While I was unconscious, they handed my company to my brother and drained nearly $1 million from accounts with my name on them. They said it was for my protection, that I needed rest. But I found the footage. I saw my own sedated hand being forced to sign papers. What kind of family does that? And what would you do if yours tried to erase you while smiling at your bedside? I woke up to the soft, repetitive beeping of a monitor and the sting of fluorescent lights that buzzed overhead like distant mechanical bees. My eyelids felt as though they'd been stitched to my cheeks, heavy and unwilling, and every breath scratched against my ribs like it was borrowed from someone else's lungs. The room smelled sterile, faint bleach, plastic, and something floral trying hard to cover up the scent of antiseptic. I blinked slowly. Once, twice. The ceiling tiles above me didn't move, neither did the thin IV tubing that looped from my hand to the metal pole beside the bed. A nurse moved somewhere out of frame, the rustle of scrubs and squeak of rubber soles grounding me in a reality that hadn't fully clicked in yet. "Miss Marin," a soft voice said, as a nurse leaned into view, adjusting my IV drip. Her name badge read Kara. "You're awake." I tried to ask where I was, but the words barely came out. My throat burned as if I'd swallowed a bottle of sand. I croaked instead, which was enough for her to press a button on a handheld device. "I'll get the doctor." I managed to croak again, rougher this time. "How long?" "4 days," she said gently. "You've been unconscious since the accident." My mind staggered around the words like it had just stepped off a moving train. Accident, 4 days. "You were lucky," she added, writing something down on a clipboard. "Your car was a mess. But you didn't suffer any permanent damage, no head trauma, just bruising, fractures, and exhaustion. It could have been worse." I nodded slowly, unsure if I was grateful or just stunned. "You should rest," she said, adjusting the angle of the bed slightly. "Your family's been informed. Your parents stopped by last night. They said your brother's been taking care of everything while you recover." That sentence hit me harder than the airbags. Your brother's been taking care of everything. Everything? My body tensed against the sheets. I opened my mouth, then shut it again. Do you want your phone? Kara asked, pointing to the table across the room. I nodded. She set it on the tray beside me and walked out, murmuring something about checking back in 15 minutes. As soon as she disappeared, I fumbled for the phone like a starving woman reaching for food. The screen lit up with notifications, texts, missed calls, calendar reminders. But one stood out. Cargill. Urgent. Call me now. That name alone punched the breath out of my chest. Michael Cargill had been my personal attorney for over 6 years. He wasn't the type to use all caps unless someone was dead or being sued. My hand trembled as I tapped the screen. The call connected after one ring. Lily? His voice was tight, clipped. You're awake? Yes, I rasped. A pause. Then a low exhale. I didn't expect you to. Listen, we need to talk. You're not going to like it, but I need to be direct. I tried to reach you for days. I was in a coma, I said flatly. I know. Another breath. That's exactly why they did it then. I didn't move. Who's they? Your parents. They filed a motion with the court. They've requested temporary guardianship over your financial and legal affairs. They've cited your accident, your condition, the unpredictability of your leadership over the past year. They claim you're no longer fit to run Marin Biotech. My vision narrowed. They what? You're legally incapacitated for the next 60 days pending review. Your father co-signed the request. Your mother submitted an affidavit with a doctor's note. A dry laugh escaped me. So I get hit by a car and they decide I'm not fit to manage the company I built? It gets worse, he said quietly. Your brother has been named interim CEO. I froze. Elias? I whispered. Elias is in charge now? Yes, he said. And Lily, there's more. I braced myself. 2 days after your accident, a transfer was initiated from one of the RD accounts. $957,000. It was moved to an offshore entity, one that traces back to a subsidiary registered in Elias's name. I didn't speak. I couldn't. I know, Cargill said, lowering his voice. I'm already drafting motions to challenge it, but legally, they've locked you out of every major decision loop. They've even revoked your access codes and executive login credentials. You're a ghost on the company's system. My lips went numb. He kept going. They didn't just replace you, Lily. They're erasing you. I hung up before I could throw the phone across the room. Kara came in again, smiling like the world hadn't just imploded. You look pale, she said. I'm fine. She adjusted the bed again. Try to relax. Your body needs rest. Don't think too much. Too late for that. Once she left, I closed my eyes. Not to sleep, but to think. Hard. I replayed everything. My mother's cold smile. Elias's hand on my shoulder during that last quarterly review. Take some time off, Lil. You've earned it. Earned what? A coma? My jaw clenched so tightly I thought I might chip a molar. I couldn't cry. Not yet. Tears would feel like surrender. And I hadn't survived all these years building Marin Biotech from my garage to a multi-million-dollar company just to be wiped off the company website like a typo. No, they had no idea who they were dealing with. I would play along, for now. Let them think I was broken. Harmless. Out of the game. But this wasn't just betrayal. This was war. The room fell quiet after I raised my glass. No one dared meet my eyes, except Nina, whose glance darted toward me and then away just as quickly. I let the silence stretch, deliberate, uncomfortable, before placing my glass back down without drinking. The silverware clinked faintly, awkwardly, as people returned to pretending this was just another family dinner. After the last forced toast and carefully curated smile, the evening began to unravel, the energy in the room thinning like air at high altitude. Elias leaned back in his chair, smug but cautious. Verna, My mother, sat with that controlled expression she always wore in public. Tight lips, lifted chin, eyes that could slice through stone. To anyone else, it might seem like maternal concern. To me, it was control cloaked in civility. By the time dessert was served, an impeccably plated creme brulee I didn't ask for, my nerves were beyond frayed. I hadn't tasted a single bite all night. My stomach was too twisted for indulgence. After the table was cleared and Nina excused herself to her room with a quick peck on Verna's cheek and a hesitant look in my direction, I stood up slowly, steadying myself with one hand on the back of my chair. I could feel their eyes follow me as I walked into the hallway and stepped into the study I had once called mine. It looked different. Not in an obvious way, but in the tiny details that only I would notice. The framed certificate from Stanford, moved, the award from the Biotech Summit, replaced with Elias's magazine cover. A sleek new nameplate on the mahogany desk read, Elias Marin, Interim CEO. I stood there, staring at that nameplate like it was a tombstone. 3 days out of a hospital bed, and I had already been buried alive. I picked up the glossy magazine that had been so prominently displayed. Seattle Business Weekly. Elias's face took up the entire cover, jaw slightly clenched, blazer perfect, arms crossed like he had any idea how to run the business I had built from scratch. The headline screamed, "The Future of Marin Biotech, Innovation Through Leadership." My hands shook slightly as I flipped through the pages. There were full spreads of him speaking at conferences, leading meetings, photos I had never seen before. And then, a single paragraph, tucked between self-congratulatory blurbs, mentioned me. Lily Marin, the co-founder and previous CEO, has stepped away temporarily due to health reasons, allowing a new vision to take the reins during this critical transition. Stepped away. I dropped the magazine like it burned. When I returned to the living room, Elias was waiting for me by the fireplace, hands in his pockets. He smiled that tight, PR-trained smile he always wore when cameras were nearby. The difference now, he thought he'd won. "You okay?" he asked, voice smooth, practiced. "You don't get to ask me that," I said, not bothering to hide the edge in my tone. He held up his hands in mock surrender. "Come on, Lil, let's not make this more dramatic than it already is." "Dramatic?" I laughed under my breath. "You and Mom filed to have me declared mentally unfit while I was unconscious, and now you've plastered your face all over my company like I never existed. That's not drama. That's erasure." His smile faltered, just slightly. "It's business, Lily. You've been under a lot of pressure lately, and you haven't exactly been yourself. We're just trying to keep things stable." "No," I said firmly, stepping closer. "You're trying to rewrite history in real time." He looked at me like I was the one who didn't get it. "Do you think this is easy for us? You've been unpredictable, emotional. You've always had a hard time letting people in, letting people help. This isn't about taking something from you. It's about protecting the company from your instability." I stared at him for a long beat, then said, "You really believe that, don't you? You've told yourself that lie enough times, it's starting to sound like truth." He didn't respond. I turned away and walked back into the dining room. Verna was sipping tea like a queen in exile, unmoved by the commotion. "Mother," I said evenly, "why didn't you just tell me to step aside if that's what you wanted?" She looked up, eyes like granite. "You were too close to it, too attached. You couldn't see how your decisions were endangering what we've built." I built it. And we kept it alive when you couldn't." I clenched my fists at my sides. "Don't pretend this was about protecting anything but your own comfort. You couldn't stand the thought of your daughter being more competent than your son." Verna's eyes narrowed. "Watch your tone." "Or what?" I snapped. "You'll sedate me again and call it a wellness intervention?" For the first time all evening, a flicker of something real passed across her face. Fear, shame, maybe just calculation. It didn't last. "You need to focus on healing," she said, slipping back into her rehearsed lines. "Let us handle the rest." I shook my head. "This isn't healing. This is housekeeping. You're clearing me out like an old rug, and you're hoping I won't notice." Silence. Then Elias, ever the golden boy, said gently, Don't worry, sis. We'll make sure your legacy lives on. I turned to him slowly. My voice didn't shake this time. It's not over. I'm still here. The next morning, I sat on the edge of my bed, still fully dressed from the night before. My blazer hung loose around my shoulders, wrinkled, one sleeve slipping down like it had given up. Outside, a thin drizzle painted my condo windows in streaks, and Seattle's sky looked like someone had smudged charcoal across glass. The silence was no longer comforting. It was sharp, surgical. I hadn't slept. Every moment from that dinner, every smug glance, every condescending smile, every word coded in false concern had looped through my brain like a broken reel. I wasn't just angry. I was alert, hyper-aware, focused in a way I hadn't been since the company's first pitch day. Elias had said, "We'll make sure your legacy lives on." As if I'd already died, as if he was doing me a favor by remembering me at all. I stood, crossed to my desk, and opened my laptop. The glow of the screen felt almost too bright. I typed in my password and waited. Invalid. I tried again, same result. With each failed login, the confirmation was no longer shocking, it was expected. When I finally tried to access my email, I got the same message, unauthorized. My name had vanished from the executive directory. My calendar was blank. Even my archived files were inaccessible. I sat back and stared at the screen. Then I opened an old encrypted app that only a few of us used during the early days of Marin Biotech. Back before the board, before the investors, before Elias wormed his way into the public-facing side of things. I typed a short message. "You there? Need to talk. Urgent." A few minutes passed. Then a ping. "Natalie, I shouldn't be talking to you." "Lily, you're not. You're replying to a backup account I never deactivated." "Natalie, Jesus." "Lily, just tell me, did a board meeting happen while I was unconscious?" There was a longer pause this time. "Natalie, yes, but it wasn't public, internal only, limited documentation." "Lily, minutes?" "Natalie, not officially, but yeah, there's something you should see." What came through next was a file, video format, unlabeled. I downloaded it, heart thumping as I clicked play. The quality was grainy, clearly from a wall-mounted camera not meant for this kind of scrutiny. The timestamp was clear, March 22nd. I had still been in the ICU that day. 7 figures sat around a glossy table. Verna at the head, Elias beside her. Most of the others I recognized. Board members, some senior advisors, the CFO. Verna's voice came through first, crisp and composed. "We can't afford to wait. The company needs leadership that reflects its next chapter." Someone asked, "Are we sure this is legal without her consent?" Verna didn't flinch. "She's medically incapacitated. The paperwork is filed. Elias will step in as interim CEO until further notice." A voice I recognized as Patricia Lane said hesitantly, "Shouldn't we at least consult her once she's awake?" "She's not fit," Verna said without pause. "She hasn't been for some time. The press won't question it, the staff won't protest, and frankly, we need a stable face. That's Elias." The room went quiet. Then came a vote, a show of hands. Everyone but Patricia raised their hand. The last image was Elias sitting back, nodding slowly like a man accepting the keys to a kingdom he never built. I stared at the frozen frame, my hand trembling slightly as I reached for my tea. It had gone cold. Back in the app, Natalie sent another message. "There's more. I found an email Elias forwarded to Verna, draft of a psychological evaluation. It was never sent to you. Want it?" Lily, "Yes." Seconds later, the file came through. Subject line, "Psych eval, use this version." I opened it. The document was formatted like an official report, complete with a fabricated letterhead and a digital signature from a Dr. Ian Grady, a man I'd never met. The summary included phrases like patterns of erratic decision-making, unresolved emotional trauma, and potential depressive episodes stemming from familial strain. The kind of language that, to someone who didn't know me, or worse, wanted to get rid of me, sounded just plausible enough. I scrolled down, staring at a line that read, Patient has a long-standing history of anxiety-related symptoms dating back to adolescence. I remembered a moment, years ago, when I'd had a panic attack during finals week in college. My mother had brushed it off, calling it overdramatic. Elias told a family friend I'd always been a little intense. That single incident had apparently become the foundation of a narrative I didn't authorize. My jaw clenched. My teeth ached from how hard I was grinding them. This wasn't damage control. This was character assassination. A knock at the door startled me. I minimized the screen and walked over, peering through the peephole. No one. On the floor sat a delivery envelope. No label, no sender. I opened it and pulled out a single page, a printed version of the exact same psych report. So they wanted to make sure I saw it. They weren't hiding anymore. I stood in my kitchen, staring out at the fog-wrapped skyline. My condo felt foreign now, like a stage someone else had lit for a play I hadn't auditioned for. I picked up my phone and called Cargill. "We're done waiting," I said before he could speak. There was a pause, then his voice, sharp with purpose. "Good, because they just filed a motion to seal all transfer records from the past 60 days. Then we unseal everything." He let out a short breath. "Already working on it, but you'll need to be ready. This will get ugly. I've lived ugly. Now I want truth." After we hung up, I sat back down at my laptop and opened the secure drive again. Among the old folders, one caught my eye. Boardroom Cam Archive, Week 3. I hovered my finger over the file. Whatever they thought I'd never find, I was about to. Patricia didn't answer right away. The line crackled softly, a pause so long I thought she might have hung up. Then came her voice, quiet, lower than I remembered. "You shouldn't be calling me like this." "I wouldn't," I said, pacing my living room, still barefoot from the rain-slicked patio. "If I didn't have good reason." "You already stirred enough noise with your little speech," she muttered. "That dinner wasn't meant for confrontation." "No," I said. "It was meant for closure. You all hoped I wouldn't ask questions." A sigh. "What do you want, Lily?" "Off the record, the truth." She didn't respond, but she didn't hang up either. "I watched the footage," I continued. "Week 3. I saw Verna call the vote. I saw you hesitate." "I didn't vote against it, Lily. Let's be clear about that." "Yet you didn't vote for it either." "That hesitation, that's what gives me a sliver of hope that you're not like the rest of them." A beat. Then, "Meet me in person. Tonight. You'll get 5 minutes." 5 minutes. I could work with that. We agreed on a cafe in Capitol Hill. Neutral ground. The kind of place that plays jazz no one listens to and serves coffee that tastes like wood chips. I arrived early. She came 10 minutes late. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, just worn down, like power had started to age her from the inside out. "I almost didn't come," she said, removing her gloves. "Then why did you?" "Because unlike the others," she said, "I knew this day would come." The moment was brief, quiet, but it shifted something in me. A slow exhale after days of tension. She leaned in. "You're not going to like what I have to say." "Say it anyway." She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded paper. No envelope. I unfolded it. It was a copy of my signature on an authorization document, dated the same week I was in the ICU. It gave Elias full control over executive-level decisions and fiduciary assets, citing medical compromise on my part. "That's not my signature," I whispered. "I know," she said, "but it's mine." And that sentence made my stomach turn. "You think I signed that while sedated?" "No," she said. "I think they made it look like you did." The words didn't come easily. I could feel a prickle at the back of my eyes, the kind that tried to become tears, but died before they reached the surface. Patricia looked away. I didn't see it happen. But I saw the aftermath, the way they rushed to notarize it, file it, seal it before you could wake up. I've seen enough boardroom manipulation to know a coordinated attack when it's dressed as concern. Later that evening, back in my condo, I pulled out an old leather-bound folder from my safe. Inside were backup files, ones Cargill and I had agreed years ago to keep offline. Contingency documents, audit trails, password logs, time-stamped transactions. It was like reading my own obituary. As the rain continued to whisper against the windows, I booted up my second laptop and opened my secure folder. The files lit up one by one like old ghosts reanimating. Among them, my personal journal logs, meeting transcripts, a file labeled Mara Shift Notes. I clicked it. Mara had been my primary nurse during my hospital stay. Steady, unassuming, reliable, the kind of woman you'd trust with your life, and I had, unknowingly, I sent her a message. Within minutes, my phone rang. "Mara?" I answered. "Lily," she said, hesitant. "I was expecting your call. Did you see anything unusual when I was in the ICU?" A pause. "Yes," she said quietly. "There was a man who came in, late one night, tall, wore a Marin biotech jacket, said he had medical power of attorney." My stomach dropped. "Elias?" "I didn't know him by name," she said. "But he had paperwork. He asked to be alone with you for a few minutes. Said it was personal." "And?" My voice was tight. I stepped outside the room but watched from the nurse's desk monitor. I saw him hold a pen. I saw him take your hand. You weren't awake, but your hand moved across a document. I closed my eyes, the image searing itself behind my lids. The pressure I'd thought was a dream, the ghost of movement. It had been real. "I thought it was an update to your DNR, Mara whispered. "I didn't know." "I'm so sorry, Lily." "You have nothing to be sorry for," I said. "You're the first person who's told me the truth." After we hung up, I paced the room in silence. Then I called Natalie. "I need everything from the IT archives," I said. "Especially internal emails from Elias. Anything flagged private, internal, or confidential." "Okay, but I shouldn't be doing this." "I understand, but they're rewriting my life while I'm still breathing. That can't stand." 2 hours later, an email hit my secure inbox. Natalie had forwarded a message that had been intended for the internal ops team but was mistakenly CC'd to her. The subject line read, "She'll be out of the picture. Proceed with Phase 2. The content was short. Bullet points, next steps, a communications rollout plan with Elias at the center of the narrative. The final line stopped my breath. Legacy protection, focus on emotion versus leadership contrast. Keep Lily's contributions soft. Frame departure as peaceful. They weren't just trying to remove me. They were trying to redefine me, to soften me into a footnote, an emotional woman who had a good run, who stepped aside gracefully because she knew what was best, a woman who never fought back. I stared at my own signature again, shaky, uneven, unnatural, and felt a stillness settle over me. Not weakness, something sharper. "This isn't fraud," I whispered. "This is a funeral. For me." But they'd miscalculated. I wasn't grieving. I was plotting. By the time I stepped out of the elevator and into the Marin Biotech lobby, the rain had stopped, but the dampness clung to everything. My coat still held a chill as I folded it over my arm. I paused just inside the entrance, scanning what had once felt like mine. A place built on vision, stubborn grit, and 20 years of nights where I worked through every fever, breakup, and boardroom ambush to keep it breathing. Now, it felt like a museum where my name had been scratched off the plaques. The receptionist, a newer girl, mid-20s, probably fresh out of UW, offered a tight smile when she saw me. She didn't greet me like she used to. I didn't blame her. She'd been told who I was now, or rather, who I no longer was. "Just here to drop off some documents," I said casually, waving a thin manila folder I'd filled with nonsense forms. "An excuse, a reason to walk through these halls without needing an appointment." She nodded. "You can leave them at the front. Mr. Marin's assistant will follow up." Of course, Mr. Marin. I walked past the front desk anyway, letting my heels tap a steady rhythm on the tile. She didn't stop me. They still hadn't figured out how to strip the confidence out of my stride. I moved slowly, purposefully, toward the central atrium. That's where the portraits used to hang, one for each of the founders, an unspoken legacy wall. I already knew mine was gone, but nothing prepares you for the sting of absence that comes without warning. Where my portrait had hung, there was now a massive digital display. High-res, sleek, impersonal. Elias's face stared down at me, eyes squinting in that fake, thoughtful way he did when trying to appear visionary. The screen looped a highlight reel. Footage of him speaking on panels, shaking hands with scientists, nodding at products he didn't develop. At the bottom, in modern serif font, was a quote I recognized immediately, one he'd mocked me for years ago when I said it during an internal company training. Emotion creates chaos. Logic builds legacy. They'd twisted my words into a weapon and turned it against me. I stood there, watching the video loop for the third time, feeling the blood in my face retreat. "Miss Marin?" The voice startled me. One of the janitorial staff, Luis, I think. He'd been with the company longer than Elias. He looked genuinely nervous, like he didn't know whether he was supposed to acknowledge me. I gave him a small smile. "Just passing through, Luis. Don't worry, I won't start a coup in the lobby." He laughed, the tension cracking just enough for a sliver of warmth to show. "Still good to see you?" That made two of us. Later that evening, I heard the soft knock I'd been waiting for. Nina. Her small frame shifted anxiously from foot to foot as I opened the door. "You're sure your mom doesn't know you're here?" "She thinks I'm upstairs doing a Zoom club meeting," she whispered, and I turned off location tracking. I hugged her tightly. It was the first genuine embrace I'd had since the accident. She pulled something out of her coat pocket. A tiny box wrapped in paper I recognized. "I found this," she said. "Dad told me it was his gift idea, but I saw the receipt on your desk weeks ago." I opened it slowly. Inside was the bracelet I had custom designed for her, gold with her birthstone and a small engraving, "Strong hearts don't fold." I felt something twist in my chest, not pain, not anger. Grief. She watched me carefully. "You're not mad?" "No, sweetheart." I knelt down. "Just remember this. If something feels wrong, even if adults say it's fine, you trust what you know. Trust your gut." Nina nodded solemnly. The next morning, after she left, I drafted an email. Not one of rage or legal firepower. Those would come later. This one was quiet, cold, and calculated. To the board, I have questions regarding the recent transition of leadership at Marin Biotech. Specifically, the sequence of events surrounding the change in executive access and financial control while I was under medical care. Could you please clarify who authorized the operational shift and whether full documentation of board consent is available for review? Sincerely, Lily Marin co-founder Cargill reviewed the draft and smirked. "You just cracked the wall," he said. "They'll either panic or deflect." They chose both. Within hours, Elias called. He didn't even try to sound calm. "Why are you doing this?" he snapped before I could say hello. "If it were really over," I replied, "you wouldn't be calling me." Silence. I waited. Let the wait settle. "You think you're being clever?" "I'm not thinking it, Elias. I know it. And I'm also done being erased." "You're making a scene. Then stop giving me a stage." Click. A few hours later, I returned to headquarters, this time with my phone already open to camera mode. I walked back to that digital screen, the shrine to Elias, and stood exactly where my portrait had once hung. I took a selfie. I didn't smile. I didn't pose. I just stared straight ahead and typed one sentence in the caption, "Still standing." I watched Elias walk away, his steps slower than usual. That moment in the hallway wasn't planned, but it came at the perfect time. 5 words. You should have thought of that. And for once, he didn't have a clever comeback. His face twitched like he was still computing how the version of me standing there didn't match the sister he remembered manipulating for years. As I stepped out of the courthouse, the air had shifted. Not the weather. Seattle's gray skies hadn't changed, but the atmosphere around me felt less suffocating, more real. I didn't go home. Instead, I went straight to Cargill's office. He was waiting, sleeves rolled up, legal pads spread across his desk like blueprints for a war no one wanted to admit was underway. When I walked in, he didn't smile, just handed me a thick envelope. "They filed another motion this morning," he said. They're doubling down, trying to paint you as erratic and unreliably emotional post-accident. I opened the envelope. Inside were documents I had never seen, hospital charts, evaluations, a psychiatric note dated March 24th. I wasn't even conscious that day, I said, flipping through the pages. I couldn't sign anything. I could barely breathe without assistance. That's not the point, he replied. This isn't about facts. This is about perception. They know that if the court believes you're unstable, everything else falls apart. Your financial rights, your legal authority, your voice. I kept reading. The psych note was signed by a Dr. Weller. The name meant nothing to me. Who is this? I asked. I looked into it. He's real, but there's no record of him being assigned to your case. Mara confirmed he never stepped into your room. My throat tightened, but I refused to let the panic show. I closed the file slowly, deliberately. Then we go on offense, I said. No more polite warnings, no more private emails. We file a motion. Cargill nodded. Already drafted. We reviewed it line by line, every word chosen with precision. There were no emotional appeals, just a clear legal challenge to the guardianship, citing medical timelines, contradictory records, and multiple violations of ethical standards. Before we filed, I posted a message on my LinkedIn page. I will no longer be silent in my own story. I did not vanish. I did not surrender. And I did not approve the narrative currently circulating in my name. For the record, I'm back. It took only an hour before the shares and comments started rolling in. Former employees. Scientists I'd mentored, investors who had once bet on me before being charmed by Elias's suits and slogans. One comment hit hardest. You built something that felt human. It's been missing since you left. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't need to. The next morning, I walked into the courthouse wearing a navy blue pantsuit, not black, not mourning, blue, because I wasn't attending my own funeral. I was testifying at the trial of my reputation. Inside, Verna sat with her usual elegance, back straight, hands folded neatly, her lipstick perfectly applied. Elias next to her, fiddling with his phone, avoiding my eyes. Their attorney, Miles Hendricks, was the kind of man who wore expensive glasses just to appear smarter. He opened the session with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Ms. Marin is, without question, a brilliant woman, but brilliance does not protect us from emotional deterioration. Following her accident, she demonstrated clear signs of instability, emotional withdrawal, erratic communication, and delusional paranoia regarding her family. Cargill didn't flinch. When it was our turn, he simply stood and stated, Your Honor, we will present time-stamped hospital logs indicating Mrs. Marin was unconscious during the period in question. We will also present statements from hospital staff who can confirm no psychiatric evaluation took place, nor did Dr. Weller, listed in the opposing counsel's documentation, have contact with her in any official capacity. The judge, a woman in her early 60s with the kind of no-nonsense demeanor I appreciated, nodded. Proceed. Then it was my turn. I walked to the witness stand, adjusted the microphone, and met the gaze of every person in that room. I didn't step away from my company, I began. I was pushed, silently, strategically, and by people I trusted most. I paused. When men dedicate their lives to companies, they're called visionaries. When women do it, they're called obsessed. When men make hard decisions, they're decisive. When women do it, we're emotional. Verna rolled her eyes just slightly. Hendricks stood for cross-examination. Ms. Marin, are you aware that your behavior after the accident was reported as withdrawn and erratic? I was recovering from internal bleeding and 3 fractured ribs, I said calmly. Forgive me if I wasn't hosting dinner parties. And your history of anxiety. Managed, documented, and never used to disqualify me until now. The judge looked up. Let's stick to facts, Mr. Hendricks. Then Verna was called. She took the stand like she was accepting a Lifetime Achievement Award. We were scared for her, she said softly, dabbing an invisible tear. She wasn't eating. She was different. I'm her mother. I knew something was wrong. I stared at her, numb to the performance. She'd always known how to cry without breaking mascara. Cargill rose slowly. Mrs. Marin, Are you a licensed mental health professional? No, but So your assessment was personal? Yes, but. And were you present during the signing of the guardianship papers? She hesitated. No, she said finally. Yet you were the one who submitted them? Her jaw tightened. Yes. Outside the courtroom, the air was thick with tension. A few reporters hovered, waiting. I kept walking. My phone buzzed. A text from Nina. Dad told me not to talk to you anymore. But I miss you. I stopped on the sidewalk, my thumb hovering over the reply. I miss you too, I finally typed. But some truths are worth losing people for. He walked away like a man who still believed the fight was his to end. But this wasn't his story to close. Not anymore. Back in my condo, the quiet didn't soothe me. It agitated. I walked to the window and looked out over the city. The skyline shimmered behind a thin curtain of Seattle rain. People moved below, umbrellas bobbing like slow pulses in the mist. I played the audio again. Verna's voice, recorded at the courthouse, filtered through the speaker. The performance had been flawless, just enough tremble, a catch in her breath, calculated hesitations. She was so withdrawn, not herself. I was worried, truly worried. I rewound, listened again. Same tone, same pitch. I noted the timing of each pause, the cadence of her sighs. If she was going to weaponize concern, I was going to understand the architecture of her lies. Cargill had once told me something that stuck. You don't win courtrooms with the truth. You win with what people believe to be true. If Verna was crafting belief, I had to dismantle it, brick by brick. Later that evening, a message popped up on my secure line. It was from Mara. Mara. We need to talk. I kept something. You should see it. We met the next day at her apartment in Queen Anne. She didn't want to meet in public. I didn't blame her. Mara opened the door wearing an old gray hoodie, her eyes tired, but not weak. She motioned for me to enter without a word and led me to a small kitchen table where a laptop sat waiting. I never deleted it, she said. She handed me a flash drive. The hospital system's recording protocol clears out non-flagged files every week, but a system error kept this one in the archive. I slid the drive into my own laptop, hands still. The footage loaded slowly, buffering just long enough to make my chest tighten. There I was, unmoving, machines beeping in the background. My hospital bed sterile and surrounded by the hum of IVs and monitors. Then he entered. Elias. He didn't look rushed, not anxious, just calm, too calm. He approached the bed, looked around, then leaned close to my ear. There was no audio, but his lips moved clearly enough. Just sign it, sis. A nurse entered the frame. Not Mara, someone else. Younger, shorter. She carried a clipboard and placed it gently on my chest. Elias picked up my right hand, held it by the wrist like he was helping me guide a spoon to my mouth. Instead, he wrapped my fingers around a pen. I flinched. Barely. But enough. He moved my hand across the page. Not once. Twice. My body was limp. My eyes fluttered slightly, sedated, but not unconscious. Enough to register movement, but not to resist. I covered my mouth. A familiar nausea rolled through my stomach. This wasn't just betrayal. This was exploitation in its purest form. The clip ended. Mara played the second. Verna entered 15 minutes later. She didn't say a word. She handed the same nurse a white envelope. The nurse nodded and walked out. I closed the laptop. My hands felt too cold for late spring. They weren't waiting for me to die, I said, voice low. They were helping me disappear. Mara sat across from me, her fingers laced tightly in front of her. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't know what they were doing. I thought it was a DNR update. I thought, you don't need to apologize, I said gently. You weren't the one sedating me into silence. On the ride back to my condo, I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I didn't scream. I planned. Cargill arranged a closed-door meeting at a co-working space downtown, less obvious than a law firm. Inside, a legal investigator and a forensic analyst were waiting. We played the footage 3 times. No one said a word. When the screen went black, the analyst exhaled. That's enough to trigger an inquiry at minimum: medical fraud, perjury, conspiracy to commit fraud. Depending on dosage records, maybe even attempted end-of-life care manipulation. Let's just call it what it is, Cargill said. They tried to make her a living ghost. We handed over the ICU medication logs. Mara had printed a copy, along with her own annotated shift notes. There were inconsistencies all over. Unexplained sedatives logged under nurse codes that didn't match the staff on rotation. What they administered, the investigator said, pointing at the dosage, wasn't protocol. This dosage could have kept her in and out of lucidity for weeks without ever allowing full cognitive recovery. Someone wanted you awake, but not responsive. A shiver ran up my spine. This isn't just a hostile takeover, I said. It's medical homicide, dressed up as care. Back at home, I sat in silence for an hour. Then I pulled out my phone and deleted every photo of Verna and Elias. Vacations, holidays, old birthdays, family weddings. Gone. I opened a drawer I hadn't touched in years. Inside, a letter I'd written to myself at the company's 5th anniversary. It was sealed, addressed, "Open if you forget why you started." I tore it open. The handwriting was mine. Younger, hopeful. You started Marin Biotech because people deserve care that isn't bought by greed. You said no to investors who wanted profit over people. You built something human. If they ever try to take that from you, fight. Not because it's yours, because it matters. I folded the letter and placed it in my wallet. That night, I uploaded the footage. Not to social media, not to the court, not yet. Instead, I sent it anonymously to a local investigative journalist who covered healthcare ethics and corporate accountability. Subject line: "They tried to sedate me into silence." But I woke up. The flash drive had been anonymous, but no one questioned where it came from. The footage spread like gasoline on a dry field. By the next morning, the newsroom at KXQ News had a segment titled "ICU Footage Raises Legal and Ethical Alarms at Marin Biotech." By mid-afternoon, it was on every major outlet's rotation. I didn't hide from the coverage. I watched every second. Verna's face on screen, calm and composed, handing off that envelope like it was a grocery list. Elias's steady grip on my sedated hand. My own signature, shaky, slanted, not mine. The media didn't use words like forgery or murder, not yet, but the tone had shifted. They said things like deeply troubling and potential legal ramifications and abuse of medical power. Cargill called 2 hours after the story broke. His voice was sharper, more deliberate than usual. "We've got a hearing. 48 hours. They're scrambling." "Good," I said. "Let them." 72 hours after the video leak, I stepped into the courthouse, not as a woman on trial, but as someone ready to turn the tables. I wore black, not to mourn what was taken, but to bury their version of who I was. No makeup, no jewelry, no apologies. Reporters lined the courthouse steps, microphones out, snapping questions as I passed. "Miss Marin, are you pressing charges? Did your mother know what was in the envelope? Was this an attempted euthanasia?" I didn't answer. Inside, Verna and Elias were already seated at the defense table. Hendricks adjusted his cuffs like he was preparing to narrate a play. Verna looked collected. Elias looked exhausted. Cargill greeted me at the bench. "They don't know what's coming." The judge entered, same woman from before. She glanced around the room, already familiar with the undercurrent of tension. "Let's proceed." Hendricks stood. "Your Honor, the narrative has been grossly distorted in public forums. My clients acted out of concern, not cruelty. Miss Marin has a documented history of emotional volatility." Cargill stood before he could finish. "Your Honor, we request to play one video. Just one. After that, you can decide whether the public has exaggerated or simply revealed what's been buried." Objection. Overruled. The courtroom lights dimmed slightly as the screen flickered to life. Elias's face appeared first. Calm, focused, too controlled. He guided my hand across the page. Then Verna. The envelope. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. One reporter in the gallery muttered, "That's attempted murder." The screen faded to black. Silence. The judge looked down at her notes, then up again. "Ms. Marin," she said, "would you like to speak?" I stood slowly, my chair scraping gently against the polished floor. "I built Marin Biotech from a garage lab," I began, voice steady. "I gave it my weekends, my holidays, my 20s. I led teams, earned contracts, secured patents, treated patients. When I had a fever, I zoomed from bed. When my marriage collapsed, I stayed in the office rather than fall apart. I looked directly at Verna. And when I was in a hospital bed, barely conscious, they didn't just try to take my company. They tried to write me out of existence. Hendricks tried to interrupt, but the judge waved him down. I continued. They used language like mental instability and emotional burnout, words that, when applied to a woman, are loaded and dangerous. They didn't present a case, they presented a character assassination. The judge leaned forward. "Do you believe your family acted maliciously?" "No," I said. "I believe they acted with calculated cruelty, which is worse." The courtroom held its breath. Later, in the hallway, reporters swarmed Verna. She offered nothing. Elias cracked. He stumbled outside the courtroom, hands in his hair, muttering something about not meaning for it to go this far. One journalist caught him saying, "I just wanted a chance. She never shared anything, not the spotlight, not the credit." And there it was, the heart of it, not concern, not protection, jealousy. The board met in emergency session. By the end of the week, they had reinstated me as primary shareholder and co-founder. I declined the title of CEO, let them rebuild the company they almost killed. I wasn't interested in being the face of a recovery built on lies. HR launched an internal audit. 2 executives quietly resigned. 1 nurse was suspended. Another vanished from the hospital's records entirely. A prosecutor filed a motion to investigate potential felony abuse of a vulnerable adult. It wasn't enough. But it was something. That evening, I received a text from Nina. "I saw it. All of it. I'm sorry. I didn't know." My hands trembled for the first time in days. I typed slowly. "You didn't fail me. But now you get to choose who you'll be." No blame. No anger. Just truth. Outside the courthouse, a reporter asked me, "What now?" I looked straight into the lens. Now I rebuild. On my own terms. There were no fireworks, no parade, no ribbon cutting or champagne. Just a hallway, a glass door with my name etched in fading gold, and the soft click of the lock as I walked out for the last time. 2 weeks had passed since the verdict. Legally, I was back where I started, named the rightful owner of Marin Biotech, founder reinstated, all privileges returned. But emotionally, mentally, spiritually, I was standing in a space I no longer wanted to occupy. The condo was quiet when I returned that afternoon, and not the kind of quiet that soothed. It was the kind that echoed. My heels clicked across hardwood as I moved past stacks of manila folders, legal documents, sealed motions, cease and desist drafts, most unopened. On the dining table, a pile of newspaper clippings waited, headlines that had once filled me with rage, now only reminded me how exhausting truth-telling could be. My name was back on the company charter, but it didn't feel like mine anymore. The building was the same. The plaque still glinted at the entrance. But what had once been a sanctuary now felt like a replica, a hollow monument someone else had curated while I was sedated. The doorbell rang. I didn't expect anyone. When I opened it, I found a small, hand-addressed envelope on the ground. No postage. Just my name in Nina's handwriting. I brought it inside, sat at the kitchen counter, and opened it carefully. Inside was a folded sheet of drawing paper and a crayon illustration. A tall woman with long hair standing on a bridge, holding hands with a shorter girl. Behind them, a large building with the Marin Biotech logo hovered above a glowing sun. Written in blocky 12-year-old handwriting. "You're still my hero, even if no one else was brave enough to say it." I stared at the picture for a long time, my hand tracing the outline of the bridge. Later that week, I made one final visit to the place I'd spent 2 decades building. I didn't schedule a meeting. I just walked in. The receptionist blinked in surprise, but this time she stood. "Ms. Marin," she said. I nodded. "Just here to finalize something." The boardroom was empty. So was my old office. But the HR director waited inside, holding a binder. We sat together, and I signed the final paperwork, an agreement to step down from all executive functions, retain founder status, and oversee the appointment of an ethics-forward leadership team. This was never about titles, I told her. Just impact. She smiled gently. "Then you've already won." Before I left, I walked to the lobby one last time. The plaque beneath the company's mission statement had been restored. My name was back on it. Beneath that, a new engraving had been added, approved by me earlier that morning. People first, always. It wasn't just a slogan. It was the reason Marin Biotech had mattered in the first place. The damage they left behind didn't disappear, it lingered. Verna's honorary board seat had been quietly dissolved. No announcement, no press. Just a reshuffling of names on a door that no longer opened for her. Elias had gone silent. His social media wiped. His professional affiliations listed him as independent consultant. No new posts, no statements, not even an apology. Verna was under a quiet but persistent investigation for falsifying medical documentation. She wasn't arrested, yet, but the stain on her name couldn't be polished away with charm or tailored suits. None of that brought me satisfaction. Only a sense of distance. Like looking at a house I once lived in and realizing I had no desire to step back inside. Even now, I still saw her in my dreams sometimes, not angry, just there, repeating old advice like a metronome. Keep your voice calm. Smile when they challenge you. Never let them see you break. She never told me how to rebuild after they broke you anyway, so I started fresh, elsewhere. I began volunteering 3 times a week at a small community center near South Seattle. No business cards, no TED Talks, just girls, young, eager, wide-eyed, learning how to build simple apps and websites. At first, they were shy around me. Then, they started calling me Coach L. One afternoon, after a lesson on front-end design, one of the girls looked up and asked, "Did you ever get pushed out of your job by, people you trusted?" I smiled, setting down my dry erase marker. "Yeah, I did." "Was it awful?" "It was the best thing that ever happened to me." She laughed. "Seriously?" I nodded. Because that's how I found my voice. Not everyone in that room knew what I meant, but one day, they would. On a breezy Friday evening, I met Mara at Lake Union. The water shimmered like glass. We walked the trail in comfortable silence, passing couples, joggers, and families with dogs. The city felt alive again, not loud, but real. She handed me a small paper bag. "Almond croissant," she said. "Thought you could use something that doesn't come with a court order." I chuckled, opening it. "You're not wrong." We sat on a bench overlooking the lake. Mara turned to me. "So, do you feel vindicated?" I considered the question. "I feel clean," I said finally. "And that's more important." She nodded. "You know, most people in your position would have burned everything down." "I wanted to," I admitted. "But then what would have been left?" She didn't answer. She didn't need to. We sat there, watching the ducks skim the water, their wake trailing gently behind them. I no longer needed Marin Biotech to validate me. I didn't need Verna's approval, or Elias's apology, or a headline that called me resilient. I needed quiet. I needed purpose. And I had both. When I returned home that night, I made tea, slipped off my shoes, and sat in the armchair by the window. The city glowed beyond the glass, not because it was celebrating me, but because life kept moving. My voice was no longer buried beneath paperwork or whispered over boardroom tables. It was mine again. What they did will never be erased, but neither will what I became because of it. They wanted to make me disappear. Instead, they made me impossible to ignore. Sometimes, the deepest betrayal doesn't come from strangers. It comes from the people who claim to love us most. Lily's story reminds us that silence can be deadly, but reclaiming your voice can be revolutionary. Have you ever been made to feel invisible by your own family? What would you have done in her place? If this story moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful, true-to-life stories that strike at the heart. Your support helps bring these voices to light. Hi, my name is Blair Cade. They never really said my name, not at weddings, not in press releases, not even at my own fundraiser. I was always just the younger one, her sister, his wife. But when my sister slapped me in a hallway full of people, and my billionaire husband shouted, "If you touch her again, I'll bury you," suddenly, everyone remembered who I was. Still, that moment wasn't the beginning. What if I told you my sister stole my scholarship, erased my work, and blamed me for a crime I didn't commit, and my own mother helped her? Would you believe me? Or would you believe the sister with the perfect smile, the viral podcast, and the story that made me look like the villain? Because that's the part no one talks about. How easy it is to erase a woman when her own family helps bury the truth. Want to know what finally made me fight back? It was supposed to be my day, my wedding, my name on the invitations, my vows, my hand in his. Yet as I stood under the soft string lights and white linen drapes of the Charleston Garden venue, what echoed most in my memory wasn't laughter or music. It was the quiet. The kind of quiet that stings, because it isn't the absence of noise, but the absence of acknowledgement. They called me her, or worse, the younger one. That's all I heard from my own family as they mingled with Dorian's side, drinks in hand, praise on their tongues, but none for me. Isolde's sister looks nice. She really landed well, huh? No one said my name. Not once. Not even when the cake was cut. I was the bride, but somehow, I still wasn't the center of anything. My mom clinked her glass during the reception and stood with the grace of a Southern belle, full of charm and glossed over history. She smiled at Dorian, called him our family's lucky charm. She thanked the guests for coming to celebrate this new chapter for the Keats family. When it was time to mention me, she hesitated, blinked twice, and said, "And of course, our little girl, the bride." Just that. The bride. Not Blair. Not once. I stood there in my white dress, clutching the lace-wrapped bouquet tighter than I should have. That small pause when she forgot my name, it wasn't new. It wasn't even surprising. It was just expected. And maybe that's what hurt the most. I remember the school pickups. Isolde would come out first, hair perfectly braided, ribbons tied just right. I'd be behind her, scuffed shoes, peanut butter stain on my shirt. Mom would wave from the car and yell, "Isolde, grab your sister. Blay, come on, girls." Every time. She always caught herself, but not before the damage was done. It was like I had to ride her name just to be seen. When I turned 12, I tried spelling my name with an E at the end, Blair. I thought maybe it'd look prettier, stand out more. I even signed a birthday card that way. My mom looked at it and chuckled. "You trying to be fancy now, sugar?" She didn't say it mean, but she didn't ask why either. Years passed like that, me trailing behind someone else's shine. But when I turned 17, I had one win, a big one. I'd worked my tail off for a full-ride journalism scholarship, interviews, essays, part-time jobs on top of school. I remember the moment I opened the letter. I sat on the edge of my bed, hands trembling, reading it 3 times before I let myself believe it. Isolde was home from college for the weekend. She looked at the letter and said, "Oh, that's nice." Later that night, Mom came into my room. "Sweetheart," she said, sitting on the edge of my bed like she always did when she wanted something softened. "Your sister's struggling. Her internship didn't pan out, and she's been thinking about transferring programs. She's been so stressed, you know. What if we let her apply under your name, just this once? She won't actually use it, of course, but it might help open a door." I stared at her. I thought she was joking. She wasn't. "We'll fix it later," she added. "You're smart. You'll have more chances." And just like that, the scholarship was gone. The university called weeks later, confused about the enrollment switch. I didn't even answer. I just hung up the phone and walked outside, barefoot, into the backyard until the grass felt cold beneath me. I folded the letter into a drawer and never opened it again. Isolde flew to Europe that fall. New program, new city, my dreams, packed into her suitcase. I didn't talk about it, not to my dad, he was already gone by then, not to Dorian, we hadn't met yet. I just swallowed it, like I had swallowed every misstep that wasn't mine. And now, here I was, nearly 2 decades later, sitting at my desk the night before a charity gala that bore my husband's name. Keats Foundation Annual Benefit. I'd helped plan every inch of it, booked vendors, reviewed grant proposals, wrote speeches, but when I searched the press releases, the articles, the digital flyers, all I saw was hosted by Dorian Keats and family. And in the photos, me, cropped, me, unnamed, me, again. I typed my own name into the search bar. Blair Cade. Nothing. Then I tried Isolde Cade. Pages, old interviews, op-eds she didn't write, PR awards she didn't earn. Somehow, even in my life, she remained the headline. My chest tightened. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe this was just the price of being quiet too long. I opened my email, wrote a message to my mother. Subject line, why is it always her name? I typed 3 lines, deleted 2, wrote them again. My finger hovered over send like it weighed 50 pounds, but I didn't click it. Instead, I saved it to drafts, stood up from my desk, and grabbed my robe. The house was still. Dorian was out of town, New York for a board meeting. I was alone. As usual, I had silence for company. Then came the knock. 3 taps. Light, familiar. I knew that rhythm. From the other side of the door, her voice floated through like it always did, too sweet to be sincere. Blair, you coming? Everyone's waiting for me. I didn't answer Isolde right away. I stood at the edge of my hallway, wrapped in my robe, staring at the door like it might do the talking for me. Her voice had already seeped into the floorboards. That syrupy tone she always used when there were eyes on her and ears nearby. Everyone's waiting for me. Not us, not we, just her. I took a deep breath, pulled on a sweater over my dress, and slipped into my heels. The gala wasn't about me anyway. It never had been. I was there to be presentable, agreeable, forgettable. Background to Dorian's foreground. Downstairs, the car waited. The driver opened the door without a word. I slid in next to Dorian, who looked up from his phone just long enough to smile and squeeze my hand. You look great, he said. I smiled back. Thanks. But inside, my nerves rattled like loose change in a dryer. When we arrived, the flash of cameras started before I even stepped out. I followed Dorian's lead, stepping carefully onto the red carpet rolled across the hotel's courtyard. Photographers called his name. Nobody called mine. One reporter leaned into a colleague and said, "Is that Isolde's sister?" And they both chuckled like that alone was newsworthy. The room inside glowed. Chandeliers, string lights, too many mirrors. Everything about it screamed opulence and order. I clutched my clutch tighter and stayed close to Dorian's side as we made the rounds. The head of the hospital board shook his hand. A state senator nodded with that practiced half-smile. I offered polite hellos and mostly received nods in return. At some point, I heard one woman whisper, "Is she his assistant, or—" Before her voice trailed off, I didn't bother correcting her. And then, as if summoned by discomfort, Isolde appeared. She wore crimson, not red, crimson. The kind of red that says, "Yes, everyone is looking at me," as they should. Her lipstick matched, her nails too. She gave Dorian a dramatic air kiss on the cheek, then turned to me. "Blair," she said with a sugary breath, "you finally wore color. I'm so proud." It was a soft jab, nothing direct, but I caught the sarcasm tucked inside her smile. I opened my mouth, thought better of it, and closed it again. The rest of the night passed in fragments, speeches, applause, champagne, more photos. I stood in group shots where I was angled just behind Isolde, like a prop or shadow. When Dorian went to speak with donors, I wandered toward the dessert table, needing a minute of normalcy. That's when someone tapped me on the shoulder. "Blair," said a young staffer, "they're about to show the tribute video. You're gonna love it." I nodded, unsure what he meant. I hadn't approved any video. The lights dimmed. A screen dropped from the ceiling. Music swelled, something triumphant and orchestral. The montage began. Photos of the Foundation's history, shots of Dorian at events, smiling children, rebuilt clinics. Then came a series of interviews. And then, my wedding. My face appeared, laughing mid-sentence, clearly cropped from our wedding footage. Over it played a voice, my sister's, from her speech that night. My little sister always had good timing. She never had the brains, but she knew how to pick a husband. Laughter echoed from the audience. The line wasn't edited. It wasn't removed. It was spotlighted. I froze. My cheeks burned as I turned toward the screen. The rest of the video faded to static in my brain. I couldn't hear the applause that followed. I barely noticed Dorian return to my side until he whispered, "What the hell was that?" I couldn't answer. I just smiled because a camera had found us again. Later that night, in the car ride home, I scrolled my phone. A clip of Isolde's speech, that exact quote, was already trending. A TikTok edit. Instagram reels. Hashtags. Hashtag gold digger. Sister had brains, optional. Hashtag wife material. And my personal favorite. When you marry up and your sister brings you down. Dorian saw it too. He cursed under his breath, tossed his phone aside, and looked at me. "Do you want me to say something?" I shook my head. "No, it'll just make it worse." He paused, then said softly, "It's already bad." I didn't argue. That night, I curled up on our living room couch, wrapped in a throw blanket, holding my phone like a hot coal. I scrolled until my eyes burned. I saw my own face, frozen in awkward laughter, caught mid-sentence, turned into a joke for strangers. I read thousands of comments, some mocking, some defending, most indifferent. Dorian kissed my forehead, but even that felt like pity. He tried to distract me with dinner. I picked at it, said I was tired. He gave me space. Alone again, I opened an old box from my bedroom closet. Inside were journals, years' worth. I flipped through pages, looking for something. A reminder of who I used to be before all this. Before my life became performance, and my name became a punchline. What I found was half-ripped pages, stories I never finished, ideas I buried under obligations. I used to write like I mattered, like my words could cut through noise. Now I barely recognize the woman who'd written those pages. I don't know what I was looking for. Validation? Comfort? Permission to fall apart? But I didn't cry. I couldn't. I was past crying. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a message in the family group chat, one that was, without a doubt, never meant for me. It was from Mom. "Let her be angry. You're the one with a future." Sent to Isolde. Not me, but it went to all of us. No one deleted it. No one followed up. Not even a "sorry, wrong chat." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I left the group, quietly. No parting words. Just gone. That afternoon, I lay on my side in bed, sunlight streaking through the blinds, thinking about how strange it was to feel hollow and heavy at the same time. They didn't get to define me anymore. I whispered it to myself like a vow. Then I reached under my bed, pulled out my laptop, and opened a folder I'd been adding to slowly over the years. It was called Receipts. My fingers hovered over the screen like they weren't mine. The glow of my laptop cast a cold light across my thighs, and my breath felt still, suspended. I had opened that folder dozens of times over the years, always adding to it, screenshots, forwarded emails, statements, things no one thought I noticed. But I never watched anything in it. Not really. It wasn't about revenge. Not yet. I told myself I just needed to remember, to make sure I wasn't imagining what had been done to me. I needed evidence that what I felt wasn't just bitterness or overreaction. The file names were clinical, coded. I scrolled past blurry phone captures and PDFs until one caught my eye. Playroom 2002.movie. I blinked. That name meant nothing, at first. Then I remembered. I was 9. Isolde would have been 11. Back then, Mom had a thing for labeling everything by date and location. We had one of those clunky old cameras she propped up during holidays or tantrums, depending on the occasion. I clicked the file. The screen crackled for a moment before stabilizing. It was grainy, pixelated like time had sandpapered the edges. There I was, smaller, rounder, sitting cross-legged in the playroom surrounded by blocks and plastic teacups. My hair was in two uneven pigtails, and I was talking softly to myself, arranging the cups. Then Isolde entered the frame. She didn't say a word. She marched in like she owned the space, because she did. She looked straight into the camera, then turned toward me. I smiled up at her, said something. I couldn't hear it clearly, but it looked like, "Wanna play?" She didn't answer. She walked behind me, paused, then shoved me, hard. I stumbled forward, my little arms catching myself against the carpet, and the cups clattered. I froze in the video. So did I, watching it. Then came the scream. Not mine. Hers. "Mom! Blair pushed me!" The camera tilted, then footsteps. Adult. Fast. The door opened, and there was Mom, eyes wide. "Blair!" she barked. "Why do you always have to ruin things?" I turned, teary-eyed, on screen. I tried to explain, but Mom was already holding Isolde, rubbing her back like she was the one bleeding. The footage ended there. No fade out, just static. I didn't move. It felt like watching someone else's childhood. Some other little girl, blamed and scolded for something she didn't do, again. But I remembered that day. I remembered thinking I had done something wrong, that somehow I'd caused the whole thing, that I was clumsy, messy, disruptive. It wasn't until now that I saw the full picture. I'd apologized that day. I'd cried myself to sleep feeling guilty, and Isolde got ice cream. I got silence. The worst part? I believed her. For years, I let that moment tell me who I was. I slammed the laptop shut, not out of rage, but disbelief. I stood slowly, legs stiff, and walked to the bathroom down the hall. I turned the cold water on and splashed it onto my face, letting it drip down my neck. I stared at myself in the mirror. Older now. Harder. But still holding that little girl's voice inside me. "They gaslit a child," I whispered. No one was there to hear it. No one needed to be. It wasn't for them. It was for her, me. I dried my face with a hand towel and walked back into the bedroom. The laptop sat on my duvet like it was daring me to open it again. I did. This time, I didn't hesitate. I found the file again, pressed play, watched it from beginning to end, twice. Then I created a new folder on my desktop. I named it Truth. I dragged the video into it. No dramatic music, no plan to share it just yet. I wasn't ready for that, but I needed to have it, needed to see it, because it meant I wasn't crazy. I wasn't dramatic. I wasn't making it up or blowing it out of proportion. I was a little girl who wasn't protected, and now I was a grown woman who finally understood why. My childhood wasn't filled with huge betrayals. It was made of tiny cuts that no one treated. And by the time I noticed I was bleeding, everyone else had already moved on. I lay back on my bed, the screen still glowing next to me, and let my arm drape across my stomach. I wasn't planning anything. I wasn't thinking about exposure or public humiliation, not yet. I just needed to feel it, to hold it in my hands and accept that my version of events was valid. That night, I didn't sleep much, but I didn't cry either. I knew I wouldn't confront Isolde tomorrow, or the next day. I wasn't going to storm her office or post something online for likes. That wasn't me. But something had shifted. There was a new stillness in me, a kind of sharpness behind my eyes that hadn't been there before. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to be palatable or passive. I wasn't trying to soften what I'd seen or justify why they acted the way they did. No, I was done shrinking. I sat up slowly, reached for my journal, and wrote down 3 sentences. They wanted a ghost. I'm about to become the mirror. They're going to see what they made. The screen dimmed to black as I shut the laptop. The glow left behind a faint rectangle on the ceiling, like an afterimage of everything I'd just felt. It was close to midnight, and the house was so still that even the creak of my mattress sounded like it echoed down the hallway. I pulled my legs to my chest and stared at the door. I hadn't locked it, but I hadn't needed to. Dorian was out of town again, and no one else would be knocking tonight. It was just me and the echo of my childhood looping silently in my head. By morning, something in me had settled. Not in a calm way, but like lava cooling just under the surface. I got up early, made coffee, skipped breakfast. There was a fire burning in my gut, but it wasn't rage, not anymore. It was something sharper. Focused. At around 10 a.m., my phone rang. The screen showed a name I hadn't seen in weeks. Marcy, one of the senior coordinators at the Keats Foundation. I hesitated, then answered. Hi, Marcy. Oh, thank God, she breathed into the receiver. I wasn't sure you'd pick up. What's going on? There's a problem. With the Women's Grant Program. Your name is on the paperwork. I frowned. What paperwork? The PR partnership with Bell Communications, the one that launched last week. My heart thudded. I never signed anything. That's what I thought. But they have contracts with your name, your email header, your logo. It's all branded under Blair Keats LLC. I stood up, walked slowly to the kitchen window. Can you send it to me? I already did. And Blair, if this blows up, it's going to look like internal fraud. You need to get ahead of it. I thanked her, hung up, and opened my inbox. There it was, my signature, my email, a digital trail that made me look guilty of something I didn't even know existed. Except I did know. I knew exactly who would do this. Who could? Isolde. The woman who turned my wedding into a punchline, who posted family drama like it was clickbait, who lived on the thrill of public image and private power. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my keys, slid into my shoes, and left. The drive to Mom's was short. The streets were quiet, and the sunlight reflected off every windshield like little sparks of accusation. Her house looked the same as always. White shutters, over-trimmed hedges, a doormat that read, "Bless this mess," the irony of which made me want to laugh and scream at the same time. I knocked. A moment passed, then the door opened, and there she was. Velma Quayle, my mother, in her pressed house blouse and lipstick at 10 in the morning, like she was always ready for company she never wanted. Well, she said, glancing at the driveway. No Dorian? This is about me, not him. She opened the door wider but didn't move aside. Did you come to talk or accuse? I came for the truth. She stepped back. Inside, the house smelled like lemon polish and a hint of Sunday roast, even though it was Thursday, the kind of artificial hominess that made everything feel staged. She walked into the dining room and gestured toward a chair. Sit. I didn't. Tea? She offered, already reaching for the kettle. Mom, I said, trying to keep my voice level. I need to ask you something, and I need you to not deflect. She stiffened slightly but didn't turn around. I don't like that tone. I don't like being impersonated for financial gain. That made her freeze. She turned slowly, placing a teacup on the table. What's this about? There's a PR deal signed under my name. Contracts, branding. Someone forged my identity, Mom, and I know who. Her eyes didn't move. She didn't ask. She just said, Isolde's always been ambitious. Ambitious? I laughed, incredulous. She used me, again. She didn't mean harm. You know how she gets when she's under pressure. I stared at her. That's what you're going with? I asked. She committed fraud. It's family, she said, as if that excused everything. And we protect each other. Stirring all this up, it'll only make it worse. Just let it go. She pushed the teacup toward me. It was the same teacup from when I was 8. When I'd been blamed for breaking a vase I never touched, when I apologized to my sister for a lie she told, when I said sorry just to stop the yelling. And every time, there was a cup of tea waiting, as if that made it okay. I looked down at it. Then I looked up at her. I'm not thirsty anymore. I pushed the cup back gently across the table. Her jaw clenched, but she said nothing. Silence filled the space between us, thick as fog and heavier than anything else she could have said. I stood. You always take her side, I said quietly. even when you know she's wrong. She's your sister, she replied. And I'm your daughter. I walked to the door, my pulse thudding in my ears. The moment my hand touched the knob, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. One new email. Subject line, "You need to see this." The subject line blinked at me again as I stood in my mother's doorway. "You need to see this." I didn't open it there. I didn't need the weight of her presence, her floral wallpaper, the lemon-scented gilt, the teacup still untouched on the table, pressing in on me as I read what was surely going to punch the next hole in the boat I was trying to keep afloat. I drove home in silence, Charleston's late-morning humidity beginning to swell against the windshield. On the drive, I kept going over my last words to Mom, not because I regretted them, but because they'd landed like stone, final, and for once, I didn't rush to smooth it over. Back in my house, I set down my keys, toed off my shoes, and opened my laptop. The email had come from an internal foundation address. No name. Just the video attachment and one line. She submitted this as the final cut. I stared at it, took a breath, clicked play. The footage opened with a bold title, "Empower Her, a Keats Foundation Story." I recognized the opening shot, B-roll we filmed from a women's wellness clinic I helped launch last fall. I'd personally conducted the interviews, coordinated the outreach, scripted the copy. But within 30 seconds, I knew something was off. My voice had been edited, chopped into fragmented statements that felt hollow, disconnected. Quotes were pulled out of context. Lines meant to be hopeful now felt shallow, even vain. And then came the kicker. Over a slide showcasing the foundation's impact, a sleek caption faded in. Created and developed by Isolde Farron, PR director. My name didn't appear once. I sat back, numb. The music swelled in the background, triumphant and bold. A woman's voice I didn't recognize closed the video with a line I had written, "When women tell their stories, they heal more than themselves." Only now, that story no longer belonged to me. It was Friday. The gala was scheduled for Saturday night, and this video, the one I had just seen, was to premiere at the event. I should have been angry, should have thrown something, called someone, screamed. But all I felt was this eerie stillness, the kind that settles in when you've been burned too many times to flinch anymore. That night, I didn't say much at dinner. Dorian noticed. "You want to skip tomorrow?" he asked gently, his fork paused mid-air. "No one would blame you." I shook my head. "I need to be there." He studied me. "Because of them?" "Because of me." Saturday arrived with the kind of humidity that turned everything soft and sticky. I dressed with intention. Clean lines, no ruffles, no soft pastels. A tailored navy jumpsuit, gold cuffs, my hair pulled back, sharp. Unapologetic. Dorian waited downstairs, ready in a charcoal suit. When he saw me, he smiled in a way that said, "You're here for war, not applause." At the gala, everything glittered. The lights, the people, the champagne. It was staged like a coronation. And Isolde, of course, was already gliding between tables like the guest of honor. Reporters flanked her. Staff hovered nearby, hanging onto her fake laugh like it was gospel. Dorian stepped away to greet donors. I waited in the wings, watching the screen being lowered behind the stage. Then, I was called up. I had 20 minutes to present the initiative. 20 minutes to talk about the thing I had poured myself into. I stepped up, greeted the crowd. Tonight, I'm honored to share a project we've built to empower women from the ground up. As I turned to cue the video, I already knew what was coming, but seeing it on that enormous screen, with hundreds of eyes fixed ahead, was something else entirely. The version that played was exactly what I'd seen. My voice distorted, my words hollowed out, and her name front and center. The room didn't erupt, it just shifted. A few whispered, a few leaned toward one another, confused. But most just clapped politely at the end, unaware of what they'd actually seen. I stepped back from the podium, nodded, and walked off stage without a word. Backstage, the air was thicker than it was outside. I stood still while people buzzed around me, lighting techs, staff, a stage manager asking where the next speaker was. Dorian appeared minutes later, his jaw clenched. "Who submitted that?" he asked a junior coordinator. The young man, barely older than 20, fumbled through a tablet, his face pale. "It came from the PR rep, official family contact, Isolde Farron." Of course it did. I didn't bother asking more. I didn't need another confession. I already had my answer. After the speeches ended and the mingling resumed, I found her. She was in the corridor, pressed between two women from a local magazine, telling some story with her hand dramatically fluttering near her throat. When she saw me, she smiled like we were two sisters catching up, not two boxers circling a ring. "Blair," she said brightly, "wasn't that a great turnout?" I stepped closer, low and steady. "You touch my name again, I swear I'll make sure it never appears on another screen." Her smile didn't waver. "Always so dramatic," she said, cocking her head. "I'm done being quiet, Isolde." She blinked once. "So what now? You going to write an op-ed? Whine on social media?" "No," I said. "I'm going to let the truth speak for itself." She laughed, light, condescending. "You always were too sensitive." I turned without responding, walked away down the hallway. And as my heels echoed against the tile, I murmured to myself, soft, certain, final. Next time, I won't warn her. I'll act. The valet line was longer than usual, but I didn't mind. I stood near the back entrance of the hotel, the heavy wooden door propped open by a metal wedge, letting in the night air. It was late enough that the crowd had thinned, the socialites moved on to rooftop drinks or private after-parties. I wasn't interested in either. My heels pinched a little. I shifted my weight, watching the line crawl forward as headlights flickered in and out of the driveway. One by one, people retrieved their luxury vehicles, climbed in with laughter still on their lips, and vanished into the Charleston night. I clutched my wrap around my shoulders, even though it wasn't cold. It felt like armor. I needed something to press against the heat rising up from my chest. Behind me, I heard the sound of heels. I didn't turn. I didn't need to. "Standing here all alone?" came Isolde's voice, soft and laced with that sugar-coated venom she'd perfected. "Would have thought you'd be surrounded by cameras after your big performance." I kept my eyes on the line. She stepped closer. I could feel her presence before I smelled her perfume. Sharp, expensive, suffocating. "You embarrassed me tonight," she hissed, voice low now, venom surfacing. "In front of people who actually matter." My body tensed. I still didn't look at her. Her hand landed on my shoulder, tight, aggressive. I spun to face her, and before I could say a word, she slapped me. It wasn't theatrical. It was fast, brutal. Her palm connected with my cheek and left behind a flash of heat that pulsed beneath my skin. I stumbled a step back, stunned. The valet stand fell quiet. The buzz of idle conversation, the shuffle of car keys, everything stopped. Before I could find words or breath, she grabbed my wrist. Not hard, but enough to let me know she wasn't finished. And that's when Dorian appeared. He moved faster than I'd ever seen him, one hand on her arm, one shielding me. "If you touch her again," he growled, loud enough for the entire valet crew to hear, "I'll bury you." Silence blanketed the space like a dropped curtain. Isolde froze, mouth slightly open. Her eyes darted to the valet stand where two young men stared wide-eyed. Another woman clutched her clutch like it might explain what she'd just witnessed. No one spoke. No one moved. She yanked her arm away and straightened. "You're really going to do this in public?" she snapped at Dorian. "Over her?" Dorian didn't flinch. "This isn't about public or private. This is about you going too far." I stood behind him, my cheek still throbbing. But I didn't cry. I didn't shrink. I stepped beside Dorian and looked her in the eye. "That was your last act," I said, calmly, clearly. "I'm not afraid of you anymore." Isolde's face tightened. "You've always been fragile, Blair. I was trying to protect you from looking foolish. Again." "You mean protect me from being seen," I said. "But guess what? You failed." She opened her mouth to respond but shut it again, her eyes scanning the faces around her. Then she turned on her heel and walked off into the dark. No apology, no acknowledgement, just exit stage left. Dorian didn't speak for a while. We waited as our car pulled around. When it arrived, he opened the door for me without a word. I slid in, head buzzing with everything and nothing. The ride home was quiet. Not the kind that suffocates, but the kind that gives space to breathe. He reached over once, squeezed my hand. I squeezed back. That was enough. At home, I didn't head upstairs right away. Instead, I kicked off my shoes, grabbed a glass of water, and sat at the kitchen island. The clock above the stove read 12:14 a.m. Dorian headed to bed. I told him I'd follow soon. Instead, I powered up my laptop, not to scroll, not to distract, to build. I opened a blank document and began outlining everything, every incident, every forged email, every false signature. I linked screenshots, attached timestamps, sorted everything into folders: financial, PR, video, personal. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity. I was no longer reacting to her chaos. I was preparing. Quietly. Thoroughly. Hours passed. I barely noticed. At 3:47 a.m., I saved the file, backed it up, and closed the laptop. I stared into the dark kitchen for a long moment, still feeling the ghost of her hand against my cheek. But what stayed with me even more than that? The silence after Dorian's words. The room full of strangers who now saw what I'd lived with for years. I stood slowly, turned off the light, and headed upstairs. Sleep didn't come easy, but it came eventually. And in the morning, when I checked my phone, the first headline read, "Sister Smackdown. Keats' family implodes at charity gala." By the time I poured my second cup of coffee, I'd been tagged in over a dozen screenshots, texts, reels, re-edited clips of my face from the gala, all embedded in commentary from people who didn't know me, didn't want to. Sister Smackdown had gone viral. Overnight, I had become a meme again. Only this time, it wasn't a video taken out of context. This was planned, framed, and fully narrated by one voice. Isolde's. I didn't panic. I just opened my inbox and waited for the next move. Hers or mine. It came by noon. The phone call from Etta, my attorney, was calm but clipped. "Come in. Bring everything." By 1 o'clock, I was sitting in her office. Her assistant handed me a bottle of water, then closed the door behind her. Dorian was there too, though he stayed seated in the corner, scrolling silently through news feeds, not interfering. This was my fight. Etta didn't waste time. "We need to go on record," she said, flipping through a stack of printed emails. "This is escalating, fast." She pulled up the latest, a podcast, hosted by two mid-level influencers trying to break into bigger platforms, cheap mics, gossip first tone, but the guest was Isolde. I listened in silence. "My sister's always had this need for attention," she said, her voice syrupy and light. "When we were kids, she once stole money from our mom's purse just to pretend she bought a gift for a teacher. It wasn't even Teacher Appreciation Week. That's how desperate she was." I looked over at Etta. "That never happened." She nodded. "I know. She's lying about things from when we were kids. Things she knows can't be proven either way." "That's the point," Etta said. "She's using the one thing you've never weaponized. Your silence." I clenched my jaw. I hadn't cried in days. Not even after the slap. Not after the video. And I wouldn't now. "She's counting on me to stay quiet." Dorian looked up. "Then don't." The next day, the internet split into factions. Team Isolde, Justice for Blair, #family fraud, #gold digger, Gate. People speculated everything. That I'd married Dorian for money, that I faked the foundation paperwork, that I manipulated him into firing her, that I'd always been jealous of my sister's charisma. I didn't reply to any of it. I spent the day archiving. By evening, I had built a 22-page document linking years of infractions, emails she'd doctored, signatures she'd faked, contracts she'd rerouted. Nothing illegal, not in a slam-dunk way, but unethical, repeatedly. And then the blog post dropped. Etta called me before I saw it. She just published a 3,000-word entry titled "The Sister Who Was Never Happy." I opened it, skimmed the title, and scrolled down. It was calculated, polished, designed to look vulnerable. Screenshots, some real, most altered. Emails taken out of context. She painted me as emotionally unstable, manipulative, self-victimizing. The golden child turned toxic, a cautionary tale dressed in cashmere. And the final blow? Velma shared it, right there on Facebook, in between a casserole recipe and a blessed-to-be grandma post. No caption, just the link. Not even a defense, just exposure. I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the screen. Then, without a word, I closed the tab. She had just played her final card. Dorian came home around 9. He took one look at me and didn't ask questions, just sat down beside me, his hand resting gently on my thigh. "I'm not going to respond to it," I said. "Good. But I am going to end it." He looked at me fully now. "What do you mean?" "I'm going to release everything. The real version. Not with rage, not with commentary, just facts." "You sure?" I nodded. "She went public. I'm going tactical." I texted Etta. Me. "It's time." Full release. 10 minutes later, she replied with a secured Google Drive link and a draft email to her legal newsletter contacts. The folder was divided by categories: financial misconduct, intellectual property fraud, media manipulation, psychological patterning. Everything had been documented with receipts. I reviewed it twice, word for word, added a preface. This is not about shame. This is about truth. This is what I've lived, and this is what I will no longer protect. At 11:36 p.m., I scheduled the public release for 9 a.m. sharp. I closed my laptop, stood, and walked to the window. Charleston was quiet. I could hear crickets from the neighbor's yard and the distant hum of someone's porch fan turning slow. Dorian joined me by the window. "You okay?" he asked. "No," I said. "But I will be." At 9 a.m., the truth would speak for itself. At 8:59 a.m., I was standing in my kitchen with a slice of dry toast and a mug of lukewarm coffee I'd reheated twice but never actually sipped. The house was quiet. Dorian had left early for meetings, giving me space, though I think he just knew I needed solitude for this part. 1 minute later, the scheduled Google Drive release went live. No fanfare, no warning, no press contact or announcement, just a hyperlink shared with a short caption, "For those who still care about facts," and inside it, years of proof, emails, invoices, audio clips, call transcripts, a video of Isolde whispering to a junior associate, "Don't worry, Blair won't say anything. She never does." Until now. I didn't stay at my computer to watch the clicks climb. I didn't hover on Twitter to track which hashtags were trending. I grabbed my keys, slipped into sneakers, and walked. The streets were still sleepy, the Sunday crowd slow to emerge. I passed joggers, a young mom balancing a toddler on one hip while adjusting a stroller with her free hand, and an old man reading the paper on a bench outside the bakery. The smell of yeast and cinnamon hung in the air like a small mercy. My phone buzzed in my pocket, but I didn't check it. I needed to move, not away from something, but toward a kind of stillness I hadn't felt in months. Years, maybe. By the time I circled back to the house, the sun had lifted just high enough to make my porch glisten. I sat on the top step, letting the warmth settle across my shoulders, and finally opened my phone. 17 missed calls. Dozens of messages. From reporters, former classmates, foundation staff, even 2 ex-boyfriends. And at the top, Etta. I called her first. "It's done," she said. "And Blair? It's being picked up by every major outlet." "Did she respond?" I asked. She posted a quote on her Instagram story, something about the price of success being envy. That's it. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. "Dorian's holding a press conference in an hour," Etta added. "Are you going?" "No, I've done my part." I hung up, walked inside. The toast was still on the counter, untouched. I tossed it in the trash, poured the coffee down the sink, and went upstairs to shower. Half an hour later, I sat on the edge of my bed in a fresh pair of jeans and a sweater, hair damp, skin bare. A different kind of armor, the quiet kind. Then I pulled out the envelope. It was small, sealed, and hand-addressed. Isolde Farron, private. I'd written it the night before, knowing the day would come. Inside was a single flash drive. On it, a voice memo from 4 years ago. A hot mic at a family event, captured by accident. I hadn't even realized it had been saved until I was cleaning old files and stumbled across the file labeled Speech Prep, Rehearsal. It wasn't mine. It was her voice, clear and sharp, saying, "Blair, she's nothing. Always was. Just a leech we keep around to look good." Along with the flash drive, I slipped in a note. Handwritten. Simple. "This is the last time I let your voice live in my head." I mailed it that afternoon. No signature, no return address. She would know. Around noon, I sat in the living room and flipped on the TV. Dorian stood behind a podium, suit crisp, jaw tight. "I stand with my wife," he said, without flinching. "Not because she's my partner, but because the evidence speaks for itself. She is not a liability. She is not a whisper in someone else's shadow. She is the reason this foundation still functions." He paused. "This ends now. My wife is not just a survivor, she's a whistleblower. And I am proud of her." I turned it off after that. I didn't need the rest. By late afternoon, the internet had flipped. The hashtag Justice for Blair tag flooded every corner of social media. Influencers who had once reposted Isolde's quotes were now issuing apologies. Brands quietly removed her collaborations. People who had called me a liar were now adding, "I had no idea," in their comments. I received more DMs than I could count. Women who had been sidelined in boardrooms, belittled in family reunions, written out of their own stories. "Thank you for saying it out loud. Your story is mine. You gave me words I didn't know I needed." I screenshotted some, saved others. Most, I just read and let settle in my chest. Isolde didn't post again that day, or the day after. Her accounts went silent. No new articles, no statements, not even a deflection. Velma didn't call, not to ask if I was okay, not to check on the house, not to scold me for airing the family's dirty laundry. She did, however, repost a Bible verse on her Facebook, something about forgiveness. That was it. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just sat there, watching the light dim across the hardwood floor, and let the silence do what it needed to do. That night, for the first time in years, I deleted the Twitter app from my phone. And I slept. No tossing, no 3 a.m., pacing, no checking if someone had posted about me. Just sleep, deep and clean. In the morning, I woke to a knock on the front door. I slid on my robe, padded downstairs, and opened it. Standing there, with a small duffel bag in one hand and a slightly crushed coffee cup in the other, was the man I hadn't seen in over a decade. My father. He looked older, not old in the way you expect a man pushing 70 to look, but in the way someone carries time when it's been filled with regret. His shoulders drooped slightly beneath a wrinkled flannel shirt, and the paper coffee cup in his hand had started to collapse near the lid. I hadn't seen Benedict Soren in over a decade, and here he was on my doorstep with a duffel bag and eyes that didn't know where to land. I opened the door wider. "Morning," he said, voice raspier than I remembered. "Didn't think I'd be standing here this long without turning around." I stepped aside. "Come in." He walked past me, slow, cautious, like a man entering a home that had once belonged to someone else. He looked around briefly, but didn't comment on anything. Just carried his bag to the edge of the kitchen and waited. I motioned to the table. "Sit." He did. We didn't make tea. We didn't pretend this was something it wasn't. He placed the bag on the floor, then reached into his coat and pulled out a paperback, dog-eared, worn, underlined. He set it on the table. "Thought I'd bring you something," he said, tapping the cover. "It's one of the first I ever put on the shelf at the store." Jane Eyre. Of course it was. We sat in silence for a while before he spoke again. "I should have spoken up years ago," he said. "When your mother let Isolde take your scholarship, I knew. I didn't agree. I just didn't stop it." I studied his face. "Why?" He exhaled slowly. "Because she was the easy one, always smiling, always charming. And you asked hard questions. You didn't perform for us. I guess that scared me." His words weren't elegant. They weren't some polished apology rehearsed in the mirror. But they were honest. I nodded. I wasn't asking for favor. I just wanted fairness. He looked down. I know. The stillness between us didn't feel strained anymore. It felt necessary. I don't expect forgiveness, he added. But I needed to say it out loud. You deserved better than silence. I wanted to say something cutting, something sharp to match the years of absence, but I didn't. Not because I couldn't, but because I knew this moment wasn't about justice, it was about release. Later that evening, after he left for the bookstore he still ran part-time, therapy with a cash register, he called it, I walked upstairs and found Dorian in the study. He was on his laptop, headphones in, surrounded by manila folders and a highlighter that had bled through 3 pages. You know you don't have to keep collecting things, I said from the doorway. He turned to me, took the headphones off. I wasn't sure when to stop. I smiled, walked in, and sat beside him. You've been doing this since the first time she went after me, haven't you? He nodded. Before you knew what she was doing, I did. And I couldn't prove it, so I kept everything. I looked at the screen, screenshots, time-stamped social posts, legal letters. You needed to know you weren't alone, he said, even when you thought you were. I rested my head against his shoulder. For the first time, it didn't feel like I was leaning to stay upright. It felt like something stronger than that. The next day, I was at the office when a woman I didn't recognize stepped into the lobby. She was mid-40s, maybe older, with eyes that had seen enough disappointment to know what lies looked like. She carried a folder, tight against her chest, and asked for me by name. I invited her into the conference room. My name's Elena, she said. Last year, I lost my house. I'd invested everything I had into a startup your sister endorsed. Thought it was a sure thing. Thought I was helping the community. I waited. She set the folder on the table. It was your name on the paperwork. I thought you were involved. I opened the folder. Loan documents, email threads, copies of press releases, all rebranded, all misdirected. My name used without permission. I pushed a single sheet of paper toward her. The notarized legal statement that cleared my name and assigned responsibility to Isolde. I'm sorry you were misled, I said. You were right to be angry. But now you know the truth. She stared at the page for a long time. Her fingers trembled slightly. Thank you, she whispered. Then she stood and left without another word. That night, I visited my father's bookstore. It was just after sunset, the sky soft with pink and gray. A bell above the door jingled gently as I stepped inside. The scent of aged paper and quiet filled the space. He looked up from the counter and smiled. Back already? I didn't answer. Just wandered through the aisles until I found the classics shelf. There, tucked between 2 pristine copies of Austen and Wolfe, was the same worn copy of Jane Eyre he'd brought to my kitchen. I pulled it out. Inside, on the first page, he'd written in small, slanted script, "She who has suffered has strength. You are her." I pressed the book to my chest, closed my eyes. Let it settle. A week later, I published a guest op-ed in a national magazine. It was about family, truth, and the cost of silence. I signed it with my full name, Blair Cade. They never said it before, so I said it myself. And now, they can never take it away. Sometimes the hardest battles are the ones we fight within our own families, where love and betrayal wear the same face. This story wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming your truth when no one else will. So let me ask you, have you ever been the silent one? The overlooked, the dismissed, the one who had to document every wrong just to be believed? If you have, I hope this story reminded you that your voice matters, especially when they try to silence it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story spoke to you, don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories that cut deep, heal slow, and remind us we're not alone.